we talk about what it is, what we wanted to see in stores and what we tried to bring. I wanted not just to have a community center where some people felt comfortable. I wanted to have a community center where I felt comfortable and where people like me felt comfortable, because I've spent my entire life being told I didn't know anything about comics. There was no way I could know about comics. I even have a point where when I was writing the comic about Matt's band, I went to the store to see if they had sold out of it, and the guy working the counter told me I didn't know the name of the comic that I was asking about. And I was like, I promise you, sir, I do. I wrote it. And I promise. Like, I know what I'm talking about. And it's always been that way, and
Hi, my name is Adam Freeman. This is Comic Industry Insiders, a weekly podcast where I get to sit down with the people behind the scenes of the comics industry, or sometimes the people who are way out front on the comics industry, as is the case this week. It has been a pleasure using my time in comics retail and in watching comics retailers get to know different types of people. When they show up, you see them, right? And I think this week's guests really fall into that category. When they showed up, I could see the vibrancy, and I could see the energy, and I could see the dedication, and I was excited to see it because we need them. We need them to show up. So please welcome to the show Matt and Shannon live at Bat City Comics in Bradenton, Florida. I'm going to let them give their whole bio because it's long and glorious. So welcome to the show, guys. How you doing?
Thanks for having us. Really excited.
Of course. I realized that because we had talked to Blackbird this year and someone else, I don't remember who was on the short list of nominees, that were like, oh, we could just make a thing out of the finalists for the Eisner. So, and that was a big part of my life. How has that experience been for you, the Eisner process?
It's been crazy. This is the second year in a row that we've been finalists for the award, and honestly, like, for me, just being a comic fan for as long as I have, I remember the first time I went to San Diego Comic-Con and just really being like, I want to go to the Eisners. I don't know, I guess I have to write a book someday so that I can go to the Eisners. It's going to be so cool. And then realizing that you could get an award for the store, and finally realizing that, and us being like, oh my gosh, we have to try for it. And then getting finalists the first year we were nominated last year, and it was just so cool. And then, of course, getting there for the awards and realizing that there's seats and that anybody with a badge can go and watch it. I was like, wait, I could have gone the whole time. Like, I didn't have to create a comic book store just to come to the Eisner Awards. What?
Nice getting the dinner, though. The dinner's nice. And the
dinner is, well, it's okay. It's a little, it's chicken. It's
nice chicken.
Yeah. It's nice. It's not bad chicken.
This year they had those excellent potatoes that I think I got 3 servings of. So
That's legit. Well done. You should get as much out of that as you want. I have to say, I loved the Eisners a few times that I went, and we, my friends always say that I bring this up a lot, but since we're talking about it, I did win. My shop won in 2008.
Yeah.
And I happen to have been an Eisner judge for the rest of the awards. So the comics are judged by a panelist, and then the comic shops are judged by a different panel. And so as a result, like, I ended up being a judge sitting in the judges table and then getting an award, which was very strange. So yes, I have been through it. And now I never really want to go back. It's so much. It's so long. It's so crazy long.
It's my favorite thing. I'm an award show junkie anyway, or at least, like, I used to be when we watched TV. I have not watched TV in 6 years, so that's different. But I used to love them. And so I'm like, I can't wait for the day where people are, like, watching the Eisners in their home and streaming them and being like, oh, who's going to win? Oh my gosh. Like, I'm obsessed with it. It's kind of a thing.
And Shannon, I guess we're kind of starting at the end here and moving backwards, but Shannon reads every book that comes out that's an indie book anyway. So she literally reads every single book that's out there that's not Marvel or DC. So by the time we also do a YouTube show ourselves that's been running for about 6 years now. It's called Wind Down Your Weekend, and it's just Shannon, and she talks about every single book. and we hold art up, and then I'm the camera operator, and we scan the art so you actually get to see the books as she's talking about them. We usually show 4 or 5 pages of each book. And so I have an insider, as watching it and being the cameraman, I have an insider on all those books too. So when we're at the Eisners, it's just cheering for all of our favorites. We're like, oh man, which one is it going to be? And there's never a dull moment for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just love it.
My company, for the last few years, we helped sponsor the Ringo Awards. So I almost always go to that. And it is, but it is like that. You kind of, have you done the thing where you pick winners and everybody puts $1 in the middle to see who?
No, that's a great idea.
I got that when I was working with Fantagraphics. They would just everybody would, you'd make your ballot, fill your ballot out, and you put $1 in the middle, and whoever picked the most winners wins. But I'm gonna tell you, it's usually the person who oh, well, that sold best, that wins. That sold best, that wins. Yeah. I was gonna talk about Wind Down Wednesdays, and we are kind of jumping around, and I think that I like that. It's kind of a memento style here. You say you don't watch TV. This doesn't surprise me, because one of my questions was, you're doing all of this, what don't you do? And the answer is you don't watch TV. And
watch TV.
I get you.
Yeah.
Or play video games.
Or play video games.
Yeah.
I had, except for occasionally I'll play backgammon online. That's about as close as I can do. But when you own your own place, you own your own business, and you guys, I don't think you've started a family yet, right?
No.
Or if you will, I don't start a family yet. That's so condescending. I apologize. But
we have a cat.
Yes.
We have a
okay.
family.
You have a cat.
Daughter.
So you have a family. That's no, let's just erase that bit. But once you have these responsibilities, who has time for an 80-hour video game? I just don't. I don't get it. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, that was me commiserating. But it does go to Wind Down Wednesdays, right? Where you guys, I think it's almost adorable that you two have this date once a week, and where you get to chat about wine and comics. I mean, it's almost like the rest of us don't need to be there. Right. Yeah. I think that's lovely. It's a lovely addition.
It's Sunday nights too, and we're closed Mondays and Tuesdays with our shop, which we started since the beginning, because you know how Diamond does stings on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
He sends out reps and tries to get people to buy the books. Well, we decided when we opened our shop immediately, hey, let's be closed on Tuesdays. Use it as a processing day and a day off.
And we were in a 1,400 square foot house. So we were there's nowhere to process without them being in front of everybody when we first opened. So we were we're just not going to be open.
Yeah, it's an easy day to close anyway. So, and then it turned to, hey, we kind of need a day to do other things. We have the nonprofit, which we're going to get to. And we need a day to kind of do all those things. So that became Mondays. And then said, okay, cool. The shop is Wednesday through Sunday, and Sunday night will be Wind Down the Weekend. We'll talk about all the comics that were out that week, because now people had a chance to pick them up. They can get on and they can get on and they can talk about them with us in the chat. And then we can kind of have a little Friday night together and drink a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Right. That's it's adorable.
Thank you.
I think it might be the cutest thing I've ever seen a couple who runs a comic shop ever do. And and this is coming from the guy who we had a nursery in our comic shop like that the year that we won, partially because we built a little one of the rooms we just essentially made into a nursery, and our little one was living there. It really was. It really was. But I will say that so let's talk about as a couple. You two, how long have you two been together? Tell me the story. Tell me about your meet cute.
You do it better.
Okay, so I, speaking of the Eisners and shows like that, I used to do audiovisual setups just like that. Truss, fly projectors, run cameras. I did that for about 12 years, Union in Chicago, and moved down to Austin, Texas. I was a touring musician, and I owned a studio in Chicago on the side. I sold my studio and moved down to Texas and became a touring musician down there, still picking up AV work. And right down from the convention center was a comic shop that Shannon was working at. And this is in maybe 2017, right? 2017. And
what was the name of the shop?
It was Hobson Heroes Comics, and they are not open anymore.
Yeah. Okay. But it was inside the Austin Toy Museum. It was like kind of the gift shop of the Toy Museum. And it was right down the block from where I was working. So I started going over there and picking up my weekly books. And I knew Shannon. She had done live streams and things like that. I knew her from the internet. And I came in there one day. And
Shannon from the internet.
Shannon from the internet. And of course, I saw her talking on there. I'm like, oh, man. Cute girl. This place looks like it's going to be a nice, welcoming environment, and we're positive vibes. And so I walked in there, and Shannon was watching Supergirl, the CW show on TV. And I said, I don't understand why she's got a good guy like Jimmy Olsen there. He's the Guardian. He's so cool. And she keeps going for Mon-El. What's wrong with this show? It's hard for me to watch. And she was like, hello, welcome to my comic book store. Please take a seat. I would love to chat with you. And so I started going up there and having my lunch break. And some days I'd bring a burger and we'd sit there together and just talk comics. And I would find excuses to go back and buy things. Rebirth was out at that time, and I was reading Superman and Batman like everybody was. And I was like, well, I should try Trinity too, right? What else can I go over there and buy just so I have an excuse to talk about?
Yeah, it was great. I could sell him any comic that was on the shelf just because he wanted to come in. So,
and now I work for her.
Uh-huh. We see how that progression happened. Absolutely.
Best ever.
Yeah. And there you go. That's you want to talk about hiring for your comic shop. That's a motivator right there.
That's what you just have to apparently marry them first.
Yeah. Well, excellent. So how do you go from living in Austin, right? And so now you've gone from you started in Chicago, ended in, are you from Austin, Shannon?
I'm from San Antonio, but I moved to North Texas to go to college. And then ironically, I wanted to move to Chicago for college. And I was 16 when I graduated high school. So my mom kind of laughed at me and told me that I couldn't live in Chicago by myself as a 16-year-old, which as a 41-year-old, I kind of get her point now, just a little bit. But I ended up just staying in Texas. And then afterwards, when I was done with school, I was like, okay, what's the most fun city for a 21-year-old to live in Texas? And the only answer is Austin at that point.
Oh yeah, no question.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to? You said North Texas.
I was in. I went to a school called Howard Payne University. It is a small school in Brownwood, Texas, which is an hour south of Abilene and in the middle of nowhere. Literally about 40 minutes away from the dead center of Texas, which is actually the middle of nowhere.
As a reformed Bible kid from Fort Worth, I know exactly where that is. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
So you guys meet up in Austin. How do you get from Austin to Florida?
Yeah. So we we started dating when I worked at the comic shop. Oh my gosh. And then I worked there for a while, and he kind of started volunteering and doing stuff with us. And then eventually I left for lots of reasons that we won't discuss on here. And then
scandalous.
Very much. There were scandals. And so I left there, and we, kind of focused more on his band that he was with. And we wrote a comic for his band that actually each issue came with a digital download for the song. Nice. And so you could kind of build out your album that way. And so we worked on that for a while. And then a friend who had been the lead investor of the comic store I previously worked in called inside that comic store went under. And the thing that he got
because you left.
Probably. Let's just say that,
It's obvious to anybody. Yes, exactly.
Right. So we he's like, I didn't get, they gave me the fixtures and 70 long boxes of comics as my payout for having invested in the company.
70
long boxes. And of all Bronze and Silver Age.
Mm-hmm. And
what?
You're not mad at it at that point.
It was great.
Yeah.
So he's like, what do I do with it? And being the humans that we are, Matt and I showed up to his house with a binder that was a business plan on how he could take those 70 boxes and work from like touring convention person into owning a comic book store, and how like the 6-year growth plan of that comic book store was all laid out. We were like, we'll start as a delivery service because we all have full-time jobs and we don't have a building. We'll go to conventions on the weekend and sell the back issues, but like the delivery service will have the new issues. And so we were in Austin is Posse East, which is actually Posse Barbecue from Donnie Cates' Redneck. And Matt was hosting an open mic there for that entire time. And so
about 8 years.
They told us we could meet there and let people do their comic ordering. And so we would meet there. We'd take some $1 boxes and we'd let people come and peruse the previews catalog.
Kind of like a pop-up comic shop.
Yeah. It's like you look at the previews catalog, you figure out what you want, you order the comics, and then when they would come in, our friend Stan, he would process all of the inventory on like Tuesdays, get it ready, and then Wednesdays, Matt and I would drive to everybody's houses and like hand deliver their comics to them and just charge them like with a square invoice.
And we started with 6 leads to subscribers. We called those 6 leads, and I think 4 of them signed on. And after 10 months of delivering, we had 26 subscribers, and we were delivering Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday afternoons. And it was a lot.
In Austin. So you know that there's no movement.
No.
And we still had full-time jobs. Yeah. So it was like, okay, this doesn't work. And so for us, our apartment lease, which was up, and that's where we had been hosting like community get-togethers. You know, we were hosting a book club, and we were just inviting anybody who was buying books from us to come to our apartment and do a book club or come to our apartment and hang out. Like,
and we eventually offered local pickup too, that you could come to our apartment and just pick up your books.
Comics. And so we were like, we're already letting all these strangers into our apartment, our lease is up. What if, because we're in Austin and everything in Austin can be live work if you want it to be, we were like, what if we just find a place that's commercial residential zoned and we just put a store in there? And then we only have to have the one rent and we don't have to worry about it. And so we found a place and we went and looked at it and we were like, yeah, this will work. And
there's a lot of comic shops in Austin, you know, still to this day, there's a lot of great stores there. And yeah, there's still like 7, and they're great friends of ours. We've connected with all of them. And so we did our demographic research and put it on a separate side of the city where there weren't other comic shops. Like, hey, how can we really focus in on an area that's already highly populated with shops? How do we figure out what we're doing in our own way, in our own area? And so we put it on the far east side of Austin, which was, you know, the far east side's not the best neighborhood in Austin, but that's okay. And service that community. Yes, people still like to read.
So. If I can just pause you there for a moment and just as a one up, not a one up, but I will say there was one year around, I'm going to call it 2009, 2010, where I went to South by, the film South by, at a South by Film Festival. And there was a couple days where I didn't have anything to do. So Brad Bankston, who owned Austin Books and Comics, took me around to every one of his favorite barbecue joints. And I think we actually went by there. And I literally 2 days of nothing but barbecue. I had the meat sweats like you would not believe. It was.
What was your favorite?
So gross.
Do you remember?
It's such a basic answer, but like Salt Lick is just such a beautiful experience for a barbecue spot. You know, there's this, I don't know.
My dad had high blood pressure when I was a kid, so I grew up no salt. So Salt Lick is like, it's like licking a salt lick for me.
Well, you know, I'm a Texan all the way through. So I think when you say barbecue, I think dry rub, which is, you know, basically salt, peppers, maybe spices and smoke. Right. And that's what barbecue is. And I will fight you if you say any differently. So
we had a customer who ran the to-go trailer at Franklin's. You know, Franklin's, the very famous one. He ran the to-go trailer and would come in maybe once a week and bring us
something.
Like a brisket, but like 4 or 5 pounds of brisket that everybody would
like a brisket.
He would bring the whole thing in and bring a rack of ribs and bring a smoked turkey once a week. And still to this day, our counter mat that says Bat City here in Florida still has the grease stains from Franklin's. And you can come by the shop anytime and see the grease stains from Franklin's. But the ribs are so good. You can take the bones and just pull it out. And the meat just slides. It was fantastic. And it got so like to the point where we were spoiled. I mean, once a week for like 2 years. You know, Franklin's
that barbecue. Is incredible. Once a week for 2 years. I am
just come by.
I'm sorry. You know what? I was jealous of your youth and vitality and all the shit you're getting done. Now I'm just plain jealous of that. All right.
We overate Franklin's. We had too much. It's going to waste.
We were having to invite like customers over for like, it was like every Friday night we were like, okay, we're going to have something like nachos, tacos, just like sandwiches, like every Friday. It was
what
like,
can we make?
People come over and like just eat this food because we have so much of it.
And again, we're in a building where we live behind it. Literally the kitchen was behind the cash wrap, behind a sliding barn door. So we would go back there and we could prep things and bring it out and just give it to our customers. And it was very community friendly.
Yeah. Wonderful.
And honestly, that's a good segue, because that was a big thing when we set out to form our own comic shop. We said, well, what do we like in a comic shop? I mean, that's Shannon and I's favorite thing to do, is go to comic book stores together. And when we go to them, it's not necessarily that we're looking for anything, but we're looking at the shops, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what do they do that we really like? What are the things that they're implementing that we really enjoy? And how do we bring those to our own comic shop? And a big thing that we think we both were looking for was a community center, a place where we could sit down, hang out, everybody knows your name, cheers style, and you walk in, hey, how's it going? And sit up there and talk about your woes and all of your nerdy passions to one of us, and make friends. You know, you never got that when we were kids and stuff. There were a couple of shops, but not. It's like, that's what you wanted all along, right?
Yeah. Oh man, you know, you want to talk about Texas shops. There's an episode that just dropped today as we're recording this. I have no idea when we're going to air it. I apologize, but we just dropped today. Jeremy and Cecilia and Jeremy Shore.
Yeah.
And they talk about their history of doing shops down in the Houston area, down in the 80s, and what a community they were building. Like, it was just like they legitimately grew a family there. And
I mean, Cecilia is an icon. Story. Cecilia is just an absolute icon of the industry. And like, for me, you know, we talk about what we wanted to see in stores and what we tried to bring. I wanted not just to have a community center where some people felt comfortable. I wanted to have a community center where I felt comfortable and where people like me felt comfortable, because I've spent my entire life being told I didn't know anything about comics. There was no way I could know about comics. I even have a point where, when I was writing the comic about Matt's band, I went to the store to see if they had sold out of it, and the guy working the counter told me I didn't know the name of the comic that I was asking about. And I was like, I promise you, sir, I do. I wrote it.
I wrote it. I'm pretty sure.
Like, I know what I'm talking about. And it's always been that way, you know. And I have, like, you know, I spent so much time with playing sports and stuff, because both my dad and my stepdad are very into sports, and I'm from Texas, so of course I played sports. That's just what you do. And then going into college, you know, I was a part of all the student organizations. I was in a sorority. I was the student recruiter. I ran the admissions, like student admissions program. And I had all of these things I did where people, when I would then go to, like, we went and saw X-Men 2 in college. And I remember coming out, and I went and I saw it with all the frat guys, and I came out and I started correcting them all on what was, like, I was like, no, oh my God, they're totally going this way. Like, this is what this meant, this went with that went. It's all about this. And one guy literally looked at me and was like, you couldn't possibly know what you're talking about. Like, there's no way you know. And I'm like, we all just sat there through the same movie. We all cheered at the same moments. What makes me any different than y'all? Like, I'm not dating anybody here. It's not like I came because my boyfriend was here. Like, right. I came on my own. And so when we talked about, like, how we wanted to build our community center, we want to build a community center, and we want it to be something where everybody feels like they can come in, whether they've ever read a comic or not, especially starting in Austin, where there were so many stores, but most of, you know, our friends, his friends, I guess I should say, were musicians, and they hadn't read comics. And it was like, so many of the people moving to Austin at that time didn't know about comics, but they all knew about the movies. And it's like, these people are coming here from the bar next door, and they're wandering in, and I want them to walk out with something, some experience, right. Whether it is getting a book, or whether it's just feeling like, hey, I could go back to that place. And the amount of people who got I want to go back to that place and hang out, and then eventually became comic readers, was kind of that big driving force. It's like, these people just wanted a place that they could go and hang out, and then they felt so comfortable in there. And I mean, it's Austin. They were coming to hang out, a lot of them, to detox before they drove their car home. And especially when we first opened, because when we first opened, we still had jobs. So we were open 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. at night. Or 11 p.m. on weekends. And so we were getting all these people who were like, oh, I just came from the brewery and I just need to, like, take a minute. And we're like, oh, dude, look around, hang out, talk with us. We have bar stools at the counter you can sit on and, like, just make friends. And then you see them come back, like, when they are sober, and they would come back and they'd be like, hey, I had a good time. Like, I wanted to, you know, talk about that thing we were talking about, or, oh, I bought that book from you. And I actually read it the next day, and it was actually really good. And are there more things like that? And that was kind of what pushed us at the very beginning of what we wanted it to feel like inside. And, it had 1980s wood paneling on the wall. So it felt like a clubhouse anyway. So it's like, how do we push that idea
Or
forward?
Your mom's basement.
Or your mom. We're from Texas. We didn't have basements.
Oh, right.
We didn't have basements.
Yeah.
No, we had finished attics occasionally, but no basements. There you go. I think we were talking about it was a community center, right? That you were creating there. And I think that's an interesting point of view and goes well into sort of the broader theory about why comic shops thrive or are resilient. Why are comic shops so resilient? Why is it that we don't see more comic shops closing than we see opening? It's like been a pretty stable number. And I think it really is that concept of community. Like I can't think of another spot in my life where I just go and I will hang out and I purchase to support, I chat. It's all culture that I'm interested in, right? I'm having a hard time, and this is in a city full of pubs and, all that sort of stuff. But I can definitely still see that what you're leaning into is the secret sauce, right, of how comic shops work.
Absolutely. So, and for us, I came from the indie bookstore world. I worked for Book People, which, being from Texas, you've probably heard of.
I remember Book People.
I worked for Book People as their school events coordinator and their teen events coordinator. And I ran the Texas Teen Book Fest. I was on the board of directors for the Texas Teen Book Festival with them. And so building that community was just kind of what you did through books. That's what, I think that's literally Book People's motto. The slogan on their stuff is a community of books, or through books or something like that. And then Matt, coming from the music world where you had places like Guitar Center and Sam Ash and stuff where you go in and
not even that, it was hosting the open mic at Posse East, and you would go to Posse East and everybody there knew who you were, and it was the second time you came in, everybody remembered you. Mm-hmm. And it was more about chatting with the people than trying to sell things in the bar, right? Yeah. And being supportive of one another. And we said, what if we could bring this kind of an atmosphere to it? There are big picnic tables everywhere. And everybody just kind of sat together, and we're like, how do we make this into the comic book store? Yeah. Rather than fluorescent lights, rented out building in a mall, or in a strip center. Like, how do we make this a thing,
we can't do fluorescent lights. Our first store only had lamp lighting in it. There was, it was like the stand-up lamps, every 4 feet, but in between every fixture. But we were like, I can't handle it.
And here it's all gallery lighting.
Just from a business point of view, though, don't you give yourself a bit of a challenge, especially in larger cities? Austin, it's a great example, right, of cities where square footage is expensive, especially retail square footage is so expensive. How do you square that circle where every dollar needs to be earning, but the thing about community is it needs space,
right?
Yeah. How do you think about that
Well, we kind of lucked out.
We did.
Because the first shop had, again, it was 1,600 square feet for the whole building. And so there were 4 rooms that were the comic shop, and 1 was an office. And then we had a bedroom that was behind a curtain. And if you were browsing the back stock and the wind blew right, or the door opened and blew a breeze in, it would blow that curtain back and you could see our bed. Another big reason why we had to move and find, but it was what we had and it's what we could get. But it was also on 3/4 of an acre, and behind the shop was a big wraparound deck, and we're in, the live music capital of the world, or it was at that time.
Yeah.
And so we thought, hey, we could have events out here. We could have bands play on the deck. And it played to a huge backyard with a massive oak tree that we put a fire pit out there and had all this backyard space to do all the things we needed to do. So we kind of cheated, as it were, by having all this extra space, because it was enough space to have a mini Comic-Con. Eventually we would have 15, 16 tents out there with artists and vendors and things, with a band on the stage. And we'd do free comic book day back there, and everyone would go around behind the shop. We could do trunk or treating and things like that. So it really lent us the
trunk or treating. What is that?
Yeah, that's what a lot of the elementary schools and libraries and stuff do now, where instead of going to people's houses, you can come to like one safe space. And in schools and libraries, they are in the parking lot and people decorate their cars. Like you open up your trunk and you decorate the trunk to look like some kind of monster Halloween theme thing. And then the kids just go from like each of those, which always kind of sounds almost less safe when you think about you're telling kids to walk up to strangers' cars,
right?
But they're in like a parking lot where everybody's there, so I guess it's
they don't allow white vans at those.
I should hope not. Yeah. I should hope not.
No, but we would have cars lined up with like things going on and pass out different things from the different cars and stuff because there was the space to do it. And so it was nice. It was like we had that kind of food trucky Austin event space that, you know, you come to think of in Austin. And so it was nice having that, even though the shop was small, you know, to do the events and things like that and create that space.
And it was, you know, and that's how we even launched it. Like our first weekend in that shop, we threw a Halloween. We opened that building Halloween weekend 2019. So we threw a big event. We actually like had our decorations for the event actually came from the Mondo Gallery. They gave us the decorations for us to start the thing. So it was really great because then we knew all of our Mondo community was going to come out and support too. I worked at the Alamo Draft House, so I was a movie host, and so I just introduced the movies, usually like the superhero ones, and some of the other ones, and so I got, you know, we were all connected, all of that networking of Austin.
And I had been volunteering with them for years because their shop was in Austin, and you could volunteer for all their events there. Yeah. So, and they only had at that time 10 or 15 employees. So it was really easy to get to know the poster and print community there too.
Yes, it was really cool.
No doubt.
We had them, we had their, you know, that launch on that first Halloween. And I was a professional cosplayer at one point. So I was in the entire Austin like cosplay community. So we felt like we had all of this stuff just come together perfectly because we had this like, you know, group of artists that we knew. We had a group of musicians who could come and play anytime we had events. I was in the cosplay community, so I had all of these cosplayers who could always be at anything. You know, I was working with the schools already with book people, so I was able to still bring those connections over to get all of our school programming and stuff, which we'll talk about soon.
I had a construction background and an audiovisual background, so I could build anything that the shop needed. Oh, we need a new fixture. Right. Sure, I'll just build it. Sure, we need to wire things in. Sure, we'll just do it. You know, easy.
And I'd been in marketing, so we were like, okay, we've got all the pieces of the puzzle. Let's just like, it kind of just like fell naturally together. And of course, like I said, that's Halloween weekend 2019. We still had our jobs. We're opening only 5 to 11, except for on Wednesdays where my job let me work from home because I was like, it's New Comic Book Day. That's kind of like a big deal. Can I work from home on those days? And
they were very kind and let you do that.
Yeah, they were like, as long as if we have an emergency, you'll answer the phone. But I was doing marketing for kids theater at the time, so they were like, you can do that anywhere, it's fine. And so we were just working those days, and like on the days that we opened at 5, I was having to ride my bike 3.5 miles home and then like take a shower and then open the store. So it was like, you know, we were making it work as much as we could. Yeah. And then Matt was working landscaping at the time.
I had a friend who had a landscaping company, and I was helping him get his business started at that point, which was kind of great. He said, I'll pay you whatever your job is paying you if you'll just come and help me start my business. And so I was driving a landscaping truck and parking it across the street from the shop for those first couple of months.
It was great. Yeah. It gave us like, you know, the time that we had enough flexibility to do what we wanted to do.
And all the landscaping tools.
And all the
to take care of the whole building.
Or 3/4
right, 3/4 of an acre.
It's great.
Yeah.
I've always thought that it was something generational in my generation where we have lots of different kinds of jobs, where we've all done lots of different stuff. But I get the feeling that between the two of you, if you had to play like two truths and a lie, you know, nobody would ever know what the lie is because you've done so many different things, in different realms.
We're those people that if something comes to us or we lose a job, we're not going to not have a job next week and be sad about it. We're going to get another job. Yeah. Something. That's how I got into construction. I worked with Slow for a month or two. Hey, I install cabinets. Do you want to come install cabinets with me? Yeah, absolutely. I do. And then all of a sudden it turns into a career for a year or two. And you know, one thing leads to another. Yeah.
Believe me, I've had a very similar life. There's a part of the reason today that we're in a different, I was just saying before we started recording, part of the reason I'm having a different background is because doing a bunch of home improvement, which has meant like building this structure and then painting and then all of this stuff that I've been paid to do. It's just one of those skills you pick up.
And you could have easily said, you know what, let's push off the podcast because I don't have the background. But why?
You can
exactly. Let's just get it done. This is I was telling a buddy who was like, "Hey, you built this?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course I built this." He goes, "How did you know how?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I just did it." And I said, I was raised to believe that you do something and you might get it wrong, but at least it'll be done. Right. So
figure it out.
Exactly.
I was exactly to say, yes, I know how to do that, and then figure it out. Like my mom became a marketing director with no college degree of a radiology firm, and she started as an X-ray tech. And they said, "Oh, we need a new manager at the clinic." And she was like, "I mean, I've been here. I could probably manage," with no experience doing that. And then they were like, "We're opening a new one," and she's like, "Well, I've been running this one. I could probably open a new one." And then they were opening a couple other new ones, and they wanted a supervisor of all the new ones. And she's like, "Well, I opened this one. I could probably maintain all of the new ones." And then they were like, "Hey, we need a marketing director." And she's like, "Well, I've worked in most of your clinics. I know what I'm doing." And they were like, "Okay, fine. We'll give it a try." And then I remember being 9 years old and my mom coming to me and going, "Okay, so I do marketing now. What do you think that means? What should I do?" And I'm like, "Mom, you should come to our school for career day. Let's make a coloring book. You can hand it to all of us. We'll think it's so cool. Bring like the X-ray slides. And then you can put the coloring book in the lobby of the offices." Because I'm always bored when I have to go to a doctor's office as a kid. And so they started doing that, and it became this huge thing that she did for a while. And I was like, haha, like I
can do that.
This is easy. Yeah, you just say yes and you figure it out. There's time to figure it out on the way. I mean,
it's amazing if you brainstorm like that, like you just said with the coloring book, what you can come up with.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how we came up with our workbook for our nonprofit.
Which I should have brought.
You should have.
I should have. I think.
There's one there.
Is there?
There's one right there.
Okay, cool.
We'll get there.
We'll take a pause. If I can run the kid to the door, you can grab your thing. So. All right. So we're in Austin. Yeah. We have the world's greatest clubhouse. And at some point, though, you got to go from Austin to Florida.
Yeah. So
where's the exciting incident there?
Can I talk about Jim?
Before you go there, we had 2020 hit, and like I said, October 2019, we opened the actual physical building. Of course, then we get, like everybody else, closed for COVID, and Matt's company never brings him back. And so Matt decides to go, like, "Hey, I have to figure it out anyway. I'm going to be full-time at the store." And that's when we actually shifted to having regular hours and like normal store hours and everything, and Matt being there all the time. So
yeah. And we started with appointments. Sorry if this is too much. I know the COVID story is not, but it plays into
our thing.
We started doing hour-long appointments with a half hour in between for customers to pick up their books. When books started coming back out was at July 2020, late June. And I'd have an hour one-on-one, just me and somebody else who would come in. And it was a lot of tourists I found, or people like business people who are traveling through and "Hey, can I come to your shop? Are you open? Well, I can book you an appointment." And so I would have an hour one-on-one with these different people, and then a half hour in between to clean, wipe down everything with sanitizing and all that. But having that hour one-on-one with people really kind of started to build relationships and friendships. And meanwhile, people would call in between and say, "Hey, do you have these books?" And I would flip on FaceTime and FaceTime over the backstock bins, and they'd pull out a stack. We already did delivery, so it was easy for me to run around books and just drop them off curbside to people's houses. That was no problem. And then, of course, the store opened back up. And we were there for regular hours. Now we have all these people who have all had one-on-one experiences with us. We've gotten to know them pretty well, but they're starting to meet each other. And so the community built like wildfire. And that's when in 2021 in May, we got a call from a gentleman. His name is Jim Gaudet. He had cancer, and he had survived cancer. I think he was 78 at the time he called. And he said, "Hey, I have 75 short boxes. Can I donate them to you? I heard from Dragon's Lair in Austin, another great shop there. I heard from Dragon's Lair. I've been getting my weekly books there for years. They said you guys are a nonprofit, and I'd like to donate to your children's programs. But I just want you to take my comics. My family doesn't really care about them. They're not really interested in comic books, and I don't want them to get thrown away. Is 75 boxes too many?" And of course, I'm like, "No." Why would I say no? And he said, "Well, can you come today, right now?" And luckily we were there with one of our volunteers, and he's like, go right now. And I ran over there, and he said, yeah, so here they all are. They've been in my garage, no bags and boards. They're up on these shelves, and I just need them cleared out. My wife's really worried about it. He's like, so I had cancer. The chemo took, and it was fine. I got one more Christmas with my grandkids, but now it's back, and it's pretty strong, and I don't think I'm going to make it. And he had heard a story about an H.P. Lovecraft collector who took all of H.P. Lovecraft's documents, journals, letters, things like that, and his family didn't know what they were, and so they left them all out on the curb, and they all got thrown away. And he said, I don't want my family to do that with these. And I said, well, Jim, what do you got in there? He goes, well, there's a Fantastic Four #1. There's a #2. There's a #3. There's a first Batgirl. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. Yeah. And he goes, just wait till you open it up. I hope you have fun going through them because you guys are comic people. I hope you enjoy. And so I'm taking the boxes out to the car. And of course, he can't help. He's sitting there on the front porch with his cane, just watching me and waving and smiling and enjoying the day. And I flipped off the top of one box. There were 3 copies of Conan #1, 2 copies of Conan #2. Oh, the entire run is here, including 3 copies of 23 and 24.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so we put them all in the car, and I have a Honda Element. It fit all of them, no problem, which was great. Took that all back to the shop. 5 of us stayed up through the night. We never went to bed going through all the comics. First Jon Stewart, first Batgirl, first Silver Age Riddler, every Silver Age book, that pretty much DC Silver Age book, even the Charlatan Blue Beetle books were all there. Captain Atom books were all there. Everything. And so I called Jim about 2 days later, and I said, hey, Jim, I got a question for you. Why did you buy 3 copies of Conan #1? And he goes, Matt, I'm not sure. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. One graded an 8.5, one graded a 9, and the other graded a 9.2. So
oh my
give
God.
you the condition of these books. Well, the Fantastic Four was still not found. No one could find it. And we had a friend who was going through the short boxes a few days before and had come across the Plop books. Remember Plop?
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, Plop,
the Robert Crumb books.
Awesome. Absolutely, yeah. Robert Crumb. And he goes, man, Plop, these are awesome. Wow. He's flipping through them. We're like, oh, that's cool, man.
Like, it's the greatest find out of all of those books we named. He's like, this is the best find.
So excited. And so now the shop's back open. Everything's been relegated to the kitchen. We're boxes everywhere. We're going through it. Oh, look, Vampirella Magazine #1, first print. Wow, just pulling stuff out like left and right. And so one of our volunteers, Nigel, was going back, and I'm running the shop, which I told you is on the other side of the wall. The cash wrap's on the other side of the wall from the kitchen. We got like 2 customers, maybe 3 in the shop. And all of a sudden we hear from the back room, I'm going to do this off mic, you hear, Matt! And I run around the back, and there in the midst of a whole run of plot books is one Fantastic Four #1. And Nigel, there it was, and the 2 and the 3 were stuck together, all in their yellow bags, over the things. And so I called Jim, and he said, when I was a kid, I was traveling through Kansas, and it was like 1971, 72, and he was traveling through Kansas. I think it was Kansas. And out in the middle of nowhere, there was a comic shop, and he needed money for gas. And he's, man, I've got a couple of comics with me. Maybe I'll trade them in. And he had, I think it was like Metal Men or something like that. And he's like, oh man, I'll trade these into the guy. I've got a whole bunch of them. Maybe I can get some money for gas. And he goes in there and gives them to the guy in the shop. And the guy said, well, look, I can't really give you money, but I can give you a Fantastic Four 1, a 2, a 3, and 3 copies of Challengers of the Unknown. And now the book was only 10 years old at that point. And Jim's like, I always kind of wanted one. I never got one. Yeah, sure, I guess I'll take it. I really need gas. And so anyway, he rolled on fumes into the next station. He figured all that out, but he got the Fantastic 1, 2, and 3. And I clean and press comics too. It's another thing that I do there. So when he found the book, I got it cleaned and pressed. We figured it all out. Cleaning that thing was nerve-wracking. Yeah, for me.
I can only imagine. Yeah,
absolutely. And we had Nigel was like, man, you guys, you know what you should do? You should fly down to Sarasota to CGC rather than putting that thing through the mail. You should fly down there. As dealers, you guys can go into the building. Why don't you go in and get that book graded, and bring other stuff. You could even put a call out to people. Hey, you want to drop off books? We'll hand deliver them to CGC. So we're, hey, that's a great idea. He's like, man, I've got flight points because he was in the military. I got some flight points.
Hotel points.
He had hotel points.
I had flight.
You had flight points. And then we had a customer who, oh, you guys are going down there? I work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car. You're my uncle as far as I'm concerned. I'll get you the family discount. So we got a car, we got the flight, we got the hotel. We came down here for 5 days and a weekend and stuff, and dropped off Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3. We dropped off the Detective 356. We dropped off a Batman 181. You know, the Poison Ivy.
The Scarecrow.
The Scarecrow, right? There's first
Reverse
Scarecrow. The 171, the Riddler. You're right, first Reverse Flash. And the Conan one, and the a 23 and a 24, a bunch of other stuff. And so we drop off like 25 books. The ones are same day graded though. They're, hey, you're coming down, we'll same day grade them. And you can do that if you pay for the walkthrough tier of CGC. So we got them graded. The Fantastic Four 1 got a 3. The 2 got a 2.5, and the 3 got a 2. But the Batgirl got a 9.6, and the Poison Ivy got a 9.0. And so we had these books. I took it back to Jim, who's still alive. We had gotten to this point now where he had started calling me on Fridays and talking to me about the Dick Tracy that week, because I was still reading Dick Tracy and he was reading Dick Tracy. It was good to meet a friend. So I'd call him and check in on him. And so we got that. We bring it all back. I show him the Fantastic Four #1. He goes, wow, it didn't look like that last time I saw it. Now that's all clean and pressed and graded. I said, do you want it back? And he said, no. Keep it, you guys, keep it. But while we were down here, we realized, we went to every comic shop that was around, and we said, wow, there's not really a comic shop doing what we do. You know, there's a lot of gaming stores, great gaming stores here, a lot of toy heavy stores, a lot of toy stores, a lot of collectible stores, but nobody who's just comics, and nobody who's really trying to do kids programs, you know.
And at the same time, while we were here, it was being in Sarasota, Matt is like, oh my gosh, this is where my family always came to vacation when I was a kid. Didn't realize Sarasota, Bradenton were the same essentially place. And so he's taking me to all the places that he always went as a kid. And at this point, both of Matt's parents had passed away. And so it was like kind of like feeling like getting to visit something that they visited at that moment. And we were in the ocean on the beach, which is now 10 minutes from here. And we're sitting there and we're talking to each other while we're like in the water. And we're like, are we ocean people? And we were like, we're ocean people. And we were like, this is so great. And then we make the joke like, oh, someday we should move here like after we retire. And then I'm like, well, I mean, we do also own our own business. So, I mean, technically we could move here whenever we wanted. And
we'll be closer to CGC.
Yeah. And we were sending like 700 books a month to CGC.
200 literally 200. We were shipping 200 books a month.
And so we were
huge
like,
dealer there. So.
We were like, you know, it's like, you know, like we could talk about it someday. And we were like, but how would we ever like do it? You know, it's going to be crazy. Well, when we got back to Austin, there was our neighborhood went up in value 48% overnight because a certain electric car dealer decided to move his factory into our neighborhood and all of his employees. And so everything went up. And so our landlord was like, I'm not renewing your lease. You can stay here month to month. I'll keep you on the same rate that you have, but just know that if somebody makes an offer, I'm going to sell it to them. And we were like, well, what are you looking for? And she was like, 4 million is minimum that I would give for y'all, but I'm expecting 6 million from someone else because they're going to raise it to make a parking garage for the buildings that they're putting in over here that are like,
we're 7 minutes east of downtown. So
and
right, real close.
2 minutes to the highway that goes to the airport, 6 minutes away. So it was like, this is a prime spot. So we were like, well, that's not going to be us. We're not going to be making a $4 million offer. And so we're both kind of secretly stressed about it without talking about it. And then we're both also kind of secretly still like, what if I move to the beach? And so Matt and I have this thing that we do where when we're both in that mood, like we just start trying to solve the problem, but for better or for worse, we don't talk to the other person about the solution that we're trying to come up with. And then we always come back together to have the conversation where we're like, I have solved our problem and it's the same solution. And so we did that. And we came to each other and we were like, I was like, I found the perfect house where we could move our business to. And he is like, me too. And I was like, but mine's not in Austin. He's like, mine either. And we've like turned the computers around and it's the same building here in Bradenton. And we're like, wait a second, you like that too? Like, oh my gosh. And We're like,
it's the same building.
Same building. We were looking at the same thing.
Same exact thing. We had the same
because
solution.
At this point we kind of knew what we were looking for. We were looking for a place that we could live or at least build some kind of living facility on site. And so we found this huge building. I mean, it was like 3,500 downstairs and maybe the same upstairs, something like. I mean, it was huge. 7,000-8,000 square feet.
So we were like, okay, well, maybe we should go look at it. And so the same friend, Nigel, who had the hotel points, was like, okay, like, I still have hotel points because he's, again, in the military. He's staying at all these places. So he's like, you want to use my hotel points? I'll book it, but I'm going to go 2 this time. Like, let's all go. I want to see this place. And we're like,
let's
cool.
Go.
And
let's go, Nigel.
Yeah, like, totally. We're down, dude. And so, we got married in 2020, in August of 2020. So we, of course, never got a honeymoon. And we had to cancel like our wedding and do it in his cousin's backyard. So all of our like flight for our wedding and all of that, we still had that credit. So I was like, look, we don't know if we're ever going to go on a honeymoon because now we have our own business. That's taken off. We don't have jobs anymore at this point. We're both like, I was still working, but he wasn't. Yeah. So I was like, we don't have extra income coming in other than the store. Like, let's just use that flight credit to go look at this building. Because if it works out, then we live in vacation. So like, let's go check it out. So we used our honeymoon flight credit to come down here and look at the building. And it was a disaster.
Destroyed. Holes in the second floor looking down. I mean, like the cabling in there and everything. The bathroom looked like the bathroom from Saw. And honestly, this actually looked worse than the bathroom from Saw. It was like the entire thing was rusted. It was disgusting. There was like rust built up in the corners of things. And it was a print factory that was built in the 30s or the 50s or something, and the electricity hadn't been updated. The windows weren't hurricane glass, so in order to do anything, you would have to update all the windows to make it up to code.
Right.
The realtor met us with a contractor, and the contractor said, "You're looking at $1 million in repairs just to start."
Oh.
And we were like, nope, never mind.
And we flew out here just for this.
That was the one building. And Nigel was like, guys, let's like look at something else. And like, as we were driving in, he's like, I don't know, like anything. He's like, you could look at that building right there. And he pointed to this 2-story house that was on the main street of town, like going into town, right towards the beaches. And it was like classic old home looking kind of place. And
Florida
I was
house,
like,
balcony upstairs, A-frame.
This is beautiful. And it had a for sale or lease sign on it. And I was like, I'm going to write that number down just in case. And so when the building was terrible, Nigel and I are like, okay, should we call the other place? And Matt's like, I'm going to call the guy. Well, it's 5:00 on a Friday. So we're like, he's not going to answer, but he does. And so he's like, I can't show it to you. And Matt's like,
here on Monday?
Yeah. And so we're like, we can be here on Monday.
Yeah,
we're here. Come in, do everything wrong. We walk in and we're immediately like, okay, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. We can do this and this. I was like, oh my gosh, upstairs, it's commercial residential zone. So upstairs is already broken into 2 rooms, plus has like a little kitchenette from when it was like an office space. So we were like, we could totally put our room here and room here. And Matt's just like, okay, where do I make an offer? And I'm like, this was everything you could do wrong. So we were like, we are not walking away from this building. Like, we were like, it is absolutely perfect. The downstairs has no windows in the main large room, so it's like the comics will never fade. Like, we were just like,
it was everything that we had been looking for. And again, with an upstairs that was it's, we're up here now, it's 2-bedroom 2-bath apartment unit upstairs above the shop. We're like, man, this is exactly what we had been looking for. So it's November of 21. The guy's like, okay, cool, here's the card, email all the people, make the offer, whatever you guys have to do. And so we get back, I send in the email and don't hear anything. And it's like, it's the end of the year. I don't know. It's November, late November. I don't know. We don't hear back from them until January 8th. Like, we went through Christmas stressing. Maybe it's not going to happen. I guess here, are we going to get thrown out of our place? This is terrible. What's going to happen with the shop? January, she comes back and says, okay, sorry, everybody's been busy. We've had a lot going on. What was the offer originally? I throw her an offer in an email. She comes back trying to negotiate numbers. Turns out the building was roped into a mortgage with 3 other buildings, and they had to break it out. So the lending that we had already applied for then after they accepted the offer fell through. Okay, it's not going to happen. I don't know. And then the guy finally came back in June of 2021 and said, hey, all right, you guys, or what, 2022 now, and said, you know what, I can give it to you lease to own, and you can get into the building and lease it if you like it, and there will be a buy option on the table. And if you want it, cool. Otherwise, it's a 5-year lease, and it only goes up $100 per year. We're like,
we'll take it.
We'll take it. So
where do I sign?
Right, where do we sign? And they sent over all the documents. We signed the thing.
And they said, you can do that, but you have to start your lease July 1st. And this is in June. And so we're like, okay, sure. So we're going to move an entire store and our lives across country in 3 weeks. We have not told any of our customers that we're considering even moving, because if we weren't going to move, we didn't want to tell them we were moving and them all leave and go somewhere else or be sad. So we were like, so we're like, okay, we can do this. So we make the announcement as soon as we sign the papers. We go live on Facebook and we tell everybody, like, hey, this is the thing. The store's going to close July 3rd. Like, we're so sorry. You can still buy from us. We'll mail you your comics. This is crazy, but everybody does know that we have no lease and that we're, like, Boston
we had started
is
talking about it right away.
We at least gave that part out, but we hadn't given like the full idea that we might close. And so we came out here. We did 4 days worth of like quick build on the part that was going to be the store, laid the floor, painted the walls, did all of that. So ourselves. So that as it spackled walls, tours wall down, anything that needed to be done. Because we knew that if we were going to get movers to bring it all in, we didn't want to have to take it all back out once we were ready to build the store. So we were like, we'll prep that.
It wasn't in good condition.
No.
The building was built in 1880 as a cigar factory and had sat vacant the last 4 years. And before that, it was a CVS processing plant, and an electrical company was in here. And so water spots on the walls,
a mess,
MDF gray floor, weird cubicle walls built into things that we had to tear out. And of course, like I said, we have the construction background, so we knew what we were doing.
Yeah.
And a couple cans of paint from Home Depot, and
a lot of cans of paint. From Home Depot. Like 4 times to get this
the entire thing, and got it all cut to the place where things could be moved into the building. And went back and packed up the entire store in
3 weeks.
3 weeks, and got it on a semi. We had 900 long boxes put onto the semi, which was really great because they were all loaded into a room at the front of the shop. So, regular room with a door frame, long boxes all the way as high as you could see, all the way to the edge of the door. Well, the movers came in with the hand truck on the first day and started loading them. Oh, don't even worry. You guys sit back and enjoy the show. 3 hours, we're going to be out of here. And I'm like,
we're going to sit back and enjoy the show because you have no idea what you're about to get into.
See you in 3 days. Yeah. So they start loading them out. I mean, these guys, to their credit, 6 high on long boxes on a hand cart, rolling them out right into the semi. Well, they get 3-4 rows into the room, and they go, question for you guys. How deep is this room? It goes back quite a way, fellas. Long boxes later. I don't know if you know the legal weight limit for a semi, and I guess I can say this now. It's fine. It's
you don't name
fun
the
of the
company.
story. Yeah. Legal weight limit is 80,000 pounds on a semi.
Yeah.
The guy said, you know what? I'm going to roll through a Love's before I get on the road, just to know. I'm going to do my own way in on this. 92,000 pounds. And if you get caught at a weigh station, they make you unload it on the side of the road.
And wait for
another truck to come. So our guy, bless his heart, blew all of the weigh stations on the way out here. And we gave him a nice tip for it.
Got here
I should hope so.
Less than a day though, so we still had to clean the whole building and move everything, get our own, the rest of our stuff into a U-Haul and things like that.
Fill holes and do spackling and do all of that. And the guy's like, well, it was Friday. He's like, I'll be there tomorrow. We're like, we're gonna leave tomorrow. He's like, well, when can you be there? We're like, Sunday at 1.
Yeah.
And so we got on the road Saturday night at 6, drove straight through, and we were in the backyard, or the back thing here where the new entrance to the shop is. We were here at 1:07, and the truck was already out front in the front of the building with a team of 8 movers ready to go.
dock already, like, down, ready to go.
Ready to go. So we got out of the car and went right up there after being on the road this entire time, being up for like 36 hours, and they loaded it right into the building.
I think I went 3 days without sleeping to get everything done, and I was like, I have no idea what's real and what's not anymore, but we're here. We made it.
And we made it, and then, the rest is history, as it were, but that's kind of the long incredible
form. Okay. I feel like there's so many things I want to double tap on because this has been a minute. And I swear to you, it's going to sound funny, but I do want to go back and double tap on Dick Tracy, of all things. I don't know about you, but occasionally in my life, there'll be something that shows up, and then it shows up again, and then it shows up a third time in the same day. You go, all right, maybe I need to pay attention to this. Maybe universe, whatever, is trying to tell me something. Dick Tracy has been that thing for me today. This is legitimately number 3.
Yay!
So I don't know exactly why that is, but the idea that you and this man bonded over Dick Tracy is really interesting, and I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, but I say all that to say, why? Let's go back to a decision that you made very early on, and it seemed to have paid off for you because so much of what you're talking about is community support, right? This gentleman shows up out of nowhere with this incredible thing that he never would have just given to a shop. But because you are a nonprofit, because you have this community center, he feels comfortable in doing that. He feels like you're going to be good stewards of it. And that seems to have led to the success that allowed you to do this like epic quest from one state to another. Something I have never heard of before, which is new for me. I've never heard of a comic shop having to move from, many states away. But why nonprofit? Where did that decision come in? What was motivating that?
Yeah, so that was actually my one stipulation from day one with the store, is I wanted it to be a nonprofit organization. And the reason why is because one of the 7,000 jobs, as we talked about, that I've had is I was working for a private education organization. And one of the things I did was I was a reading and writing specialist for Title I schools, so underfunded communities. And I was working at an all-girls school, and they had become that because, as you may know, because you're from Texas, with the No Child Left Behind program, it's really more of the Every Child Left Behind program in the end. And so in Austin and most of Texas, the way it works is if your school is underperforming for test results, and only by standardized tests, they don't care about anything else. But if your standardized test scores as a school are below the level they want you to be at, eventually they will either turn your school into a magnet school or a charter school. And if you still don't perform to those standards, they will just close the school and send the kids to all these different places. And so I was at a school that had already been turned into a magnet school. And what they had done was they had turned it into an all-girls school. And so they could bring the girls from all the different neighborhood schools and hopefully bring up those scores. And think, because, the whole philosophy of like, oh, well, kids are just distracted by the opposite sex is why they can't learn, which is ridiculous, especially in a middle school. And so they had brought us in, and because they were still not performing to the standard they wanted. And to the point that they were taking a practice standardized test in the fall and then the actual standardized test in the spring. So these kids were learning absolutely nothing but the standardized test and getting the same pieces of the information over and over again. And so the first 2 weeks I was there, they said, we just want you to evaluate what you see in the classes. We're going to put you in a 6th grade class, 7th grade class, 8th grade class. Tell us what you see. And so I did something that I'm pretty sure nobody had done in administration, which was talk to the students about what they felt. And they were like, Miss, we're bored. It's the same things all the time. I've been doing the same worksheet since the 6th grade, and I'm in 8th grade now. Like, I don't want to do this worksheet anymore. So I just write down answers and hope for the best. And they're like, I'm like, okay, cool. I was like, well, what do you like? And I'm, oh, well, Miss, I like manga, or Miss, I like this TV show that I've been watching. And so I went to administration and I said, let's make a reading and a writing lab for these kids that's based off of pop culture. let's actually get them the stuff that they want to do. And they were like, well, how does it fall into, you know, the Texas standards, the TEKS, where is that going to get them? And I was like, if I can make a pop culture classroom that hits all of those standards and teaches these kids this information, will you let me do it? Like, if I present the curriculum to you? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. And I said, here's the end of the day, I'm not a teacher here. I'm a private education organization that y'all brought in for like additional resources. So if the school board's mad at you, you just go, okay, we won't use them anymore. And sure. And then we all go away and it's fine, but at least the kids get a chance to try something. So I built entire curriculums for all 3 grades out of all of the like things that they love. Like we had a zombie week, and so the first day we looked at images from Walking Dead, and we learned how to piece out what we were seeing from the image. And then it was like, okay, that's a skill called inference. Now let's look at that in the written text of what the Walking Dead says, and let's see how that works. Like, okay, you saw this on the show, you might have an idea of this, let's keep going. And then, you know, we worked the next day. My favorite challenge, we read the lyrics to Michael Jackson's Thriller, and they had to use figurative language to find out if the monsters were real or not. And I had a 7th grade girl come up to me and go, Miss, I'm really upset right now. And I was like, why? And she goes, because I just learned there are no monsters in this scenario. And Michael Jackson was just using it to get into this girl's pants in the song. And I'm so offended. And I was like, oh, we have more conversations about Michael Jackson to have in the future, but we're not going to have them right now. I was like, this is, but like, yes, congratulations for getting there are actually no monsters. Like you totally nailed it. Way to use your resources. And we just did that until by the end of the week, like it was, you know, comics, it was TV shows, it was the script from Beetlejuice, it was different things like that. And by the end of the week, they read an article that might appear on an actual test. And they knew all the skills. They could do it. They were like, oh, this is easy. This is this. They want me to do this. I've already had that. And so we were able to build that out. And so I got to see the process of kids actually learning with what they wanted to learn with. And that has become the fundamentals, essentially, of what we do. And I'll circle back to that to answer your question first. But so I went in and I went to work for, you know, Book People, and Book People let me do all kinds of cool things like that. Well, I went to work for that comic book store that I was working at, and I was like, hey, like, we could do this. Like, kids love learning through comic books. Comic books are such a huge way to, like, could we go into schools and have this program where we teach kids? And they were like, no, that's not what we want to do. That's not our vibe. Like, they wanted to be like a comic shop and bar kind of environment. And I was like, oh, okay. Sure. And so when we were opening our store, I was like, look, this is really important. And I think that it's a huge like way to reach the younger generation, to get them into comics, but it's also a great way to actually teach the younger generation. And as somebody who that was such a huge passion for me, and I have all of the resources now at my disposal, why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we come into this? And Matt and Stan were like, duh, okay, go ahead. If that's what you want to do, like, that sounds great. Like, let's do it. And I was like, okay, cool. And so it was from the beginning, it was, this is going to be an organization that is focused on building community for everybody. And that includes that younger generation. And that includes being, you know, like kid forward and family forward, and not just, you know, like, oh yeah, you're welcome here. It's like, no, it's actually like, it's got so many things that can help you. And the principle that we built that off of is the effective hypothesis filter, which is that everybody learns through information coming into your brain. Information comes into your brain through a funnel system. You know, we don't take in every single bit of information that comes our way, but that funnel gets smaller and smaller as our like interest is affected. You know, if you're not motivated to even learn a thing because you're bored with it, the filter gets smaller. If you're not motivated to learn because the information stresses you out, like maybe you're dyslexic and it's hard to read, that filter gets smaller. If you're like just not motivated because you're tired of hearing about it, the filter gets smaller. And so it was like, comic books bust that back open. It takes away, it is a dyslexic friendly format. It is an ESL, an English as a second language, like helpful format. It is something that already removes that barrier, but then also the biggest thing is it removes that boredom barrier. You're no longer bored when I hand you Dogman. You're not mad at me if I say, hey, we're going to read today, and then I hand you a Dogman book and you're 9 years old. You're like, I've already read this one, miss. Let's pick the other one. Like, that's the furthest to getting bored with me you're going to be. And even then, you're not mad that I'm handing it to you. And we could do that. We could open that whole world back up for kids and get them to want to learn. And so it's like, hey, let's do that. Like, let's have reading programs where kids get to come in and they read a comic book, and then we do something. We have our Story Spelunkers program, which is exactly what that is. It's teaching kids all the reading skills that they need to know, but they're doing it with comics. So we all play a different character and we read an issue of a comic out loud at a Story Spelunkers meeting and take turns. We have a dry erase board where we write down words that if anybody doesn't understand a word, that vocabulary word goes on the board for us to talk about. And then we do some kind of an activity. And it's so much fun. They don't even realize it. In fact, my adult book club is mad that they don't get to do the same programming that Story Spelunkers
activity.
They literally just asked me at our last adult book club. They were like, hey, we see the activity that Story Spelunkers got this week. How come we never get activities at our book club? And I'm like, do y'all want them? Like, you can totally do them.
We can put them together.
Like,
we can do a whiteboard of vocabulary words. It's fine. It's
add their vocabulary words to the kids' whiteboard. They were so excited. But
it's still up there.
Yeah.
And my big thing was I said, wow, that's a great idea. This sounds fantastic. When I was a kid, it didn't feel like I was welcome in the comic book store. It felt like everything was high up and don't touch anything and everything's collectible and it's not for you. I said, what if we did a kids subscription program? Mm-hmm. What if kids can subscribe too? Adults get to subscribe. How come kids can't get to subscribe? Oh, well, you can put it on your parents. Your parents can sign up. But why can't a kid sign up? Well, what if we did kids subscribers and all the kids subscribers get 10% off every single day that they come into the store on anything that they purchase to encourage them to read? And what if they get a free book every month? Mm-hmm. And so it kind of just started with that.
And there's free books for them every time they come in. Like, there's free comics up at the front for every age. Like, we have a whole free comic section when you walk in, but we make sure that every kid leaves with at least one comic every time they come in. But they do get the book that, and a lot of those are free comic book day books, but the free book they get once a month is actually a new title. We just did Saturday Morning Adventures from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We did that a couple months ago for Story Spelunkers, and they got the same issue that at the same time we had a guy who had done a cover for Lightning Comics, Tim Von Clote. He's one of our customers, and he had done a store exclusive with Lightning Comics, and so he was here. Lightning and him came in, and they were doing a signing here for his cover, which was super cool of Lightning to let us like steal their artists and have him sign with us. And so he came in to sign that day, and the kids read the same issue for Story Spelunkers. And so they all got that issue. And then their activity was they were learning summaries. So we learned how to summarize it in chronological order, and then we learned how to summarize just like based off big events. And then they each wrote a comic using their summaries. They could choose which one of their summaries they wanted, but they had to write a 1-page comic of the story based off of just the summaries that we had created. And then they got to go take those summaries of their comics that they made to Tim and explain their Ninja Turtles comic to the guy who was signing Ninja Turtles comics in the store. And so it did the number one thing we really want to accomplish, which is a developmental memory. Those kids all came in their Ninja Turtle shirts. We had girls that had their big giant, like 2 foot tall, like Leonardo stuffies with them. And they're all taking pictures with this artist, and they're so excited, and they're getting to tell them about their story. And of course, Tim is an absolute wonderful human being and is sitting there like, oh my gosh, tell me what did you do? Oh, I like the way you drew this. Oh man, your Leonardo's better than my Leonardo, like Great. Pumping them up. And it's so wonderful to see. And honestly, it's that developmental core memory that we're establishing with those kids. They're going to love comics forever, and they're going to love reading forever, which is really the most important part. And so it's so great. It's such a cool thing to be able to bring that in. So you're no longer just oh, we're a store where like the kids maybe will want to come. Now we're the place. Now it's, we always say like comic store kids, like come if you want to bring your parents, you can too. Like because there's so many kids who just want to come here.
I have a kid having a birthday party at the shop on Saturday.
Yeah.
This coming Saturday.
Yeah.
Because they want to have their birthday party here.
And we get so many asks for that we like started a birthday party service. It's like, okay, you want to have birthday parties at the comic store? Cool. We do that now.
We had Girl Scouts here this weekend, and all the girls are running around in single file. The daisies too, the little ones, and they're all running around. And this mom comes up to me and goes, I'm so sorry that the kids are running around. I said, why? That's the point of the comic book store. Even if they knock something over, what, is it going to break? It's a book. I don't...
Right. We have the expensive ones behind the counter for a reason. Yeah. Otherwise, the aisles are big enough that your kids can run around. You can push the stroller. The kids section is at the back of the store, so parents don't have to worry about if the kids running out the door. They have to pass their parents to get out the door.
And especially in the times that we live in with human trafficking and things like that, kids sections at the front of a store terrify me because anyone can open that door and grab somebody and pull them. But if the kids section's all the way in the very back of the store, that kid has to pull past everybody else in that shop to get out of there, and then the parents know where they are too.
And it's all sight lines. There's seats in the kids section. All the books in the kids section are at their height, so they know. We always tell them if you can reach it, you can touch it, you can read it.
You can read it.
And then there's coloring table back there, but on the other side of the kids section is our classroom where we teach all our classes. And at all times, anytime, kids can go back there, and there's art supplies set up so they can do arts and crafts. They can they can read their books. We have books back there that are like, we have the original prints of Captain Underpants back there, so all the kids can go out there and read.
So they have kind of a library.
They have their own little
and there's a piano in there, so kids can play the piano if they feel like it. And some parents will come and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry my kid's back there banging on the piano. I'm like, I don't care.
That's why
it was
there.
It was the piano that my dad bought my mom back in the 70s on their first wedding anniversary. And I've kind of toted it with me my whole life. And it's like, you know what? My mom was a teacher. She was a special ed teacher. She would like this if this was in the classroom. And now the kids, hey, can I go play the piano? Sure. Is it always great? No. But it's a kid using their imagination, which is the best part.
So
yeah,
cute.
It's so cool. And then everybody in the shop's like, this is great.
Well, all right. So how many would you say do you have, like, demographically? Let's talk about your average visitor. How many kids are you seeing on a week? Like, is that percentage wise?
Pretty much every adult who comes in has a child with them.
I would say it's a large majority.
Like 75% of adults who come in have a child with them. And they let them run off to the back because the kids knows where the things are. And we know the kid's name too. And they run to the back and it's no problem, But I'd say 75% of adults who come in have a kid with them.
Yeah. And we still have a full comic book store. There's 500,000 issues of comics on the floor at any given time. We get all the new books. We have all the old books. We have all the collections.
There's 300 slabs on the floor at any moment.
Right. There's always slabs. There's high-end comics. We have a regular subscription program for adults. So we don't disregard the adults. In fact, this week we have 2 events for kids and 2 events for adults going on this week in the shop. So it's not like the adults never feel like they're not represented as well. But the kids have this massive thing, and to the point
community
of
center for everyone,
for everyone, and to the point of why a nonprofit, because of course you could do that with any store,
Sure,
you don't.
Yeah, that was my next question, right? Why nonprofit?
Yeah, because Jen Haynes does all of those things at the Dragon. She does so many of those kinds of things there.
Absolutely.
Why the nonprofit specifically is growing up in Title I schools, in inner city San Antonio, and then working in Title I schools. One of the things that becomes really apparent to you is that funding is not there for these schools. And wanting to develop programming that we take into schools, to do programming that we can do with the public library system, to work with, we've got partnerships with the Boys and Girls Club, with all of the Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, all of these different programs. And funding doesn't exist for everybody at all times. So as a store, if I did this programming and I was like, okay, we have to charge every kid. And, you see some places that do programs for kids, it's like $300 for, a workshop for a kid. It's $100. It's $50. Even if it's $25. I know how many times I didn't even ask my parents if I could do something because the cost was $10. And I was like, they're going to tell me no. And then I'm going to be upset that I don't get to do it because we don't have money. And I don't want that to ever be a hindrance from a school. I get so many schools that are like, oh, we would love to have your program in, but if it's this much money or more, we couldn't do it. And I'm like, well, that's the best part about it. It's free. I'm not charging you. It is a free program for your school. It is a free program for your Boys and Girls Club. Last summer, we taught every week at the Boys and Girls Club. We had a reading class every single week for their middle schoolers at the Boys and Girls Club, and it was completely free to the entire Boys and Girls Club system of our county. And we were there teaching them all kinds of different reading skills, all through comic books. They got to read AF-15, not in physical format. And they got to see that experience and then compare it with like the 2022 retelling of Spider-Man's origin story. So it's like, hey, what are we gonna learn here from these differences? And so I'm able to fund the programming with what the store does, but I'm also, which is the way that works, is the store's funding goes towards the nonprofit programming. So a school doesn't have to worry about that. But I'm also able to say, hey, we've created this giant program and I want to make it even bigger, and I can go to a grant funding organization and I can say, hey, I have 2,000 kids who do this program and it's showing this progress. We want to make it bigger than that. Can you help us fund that? And they will, because we are a nonprofit organization, so we can get the grant funding.
So has that happened, or is this, all this you're talking about right now, is this all funded by the shop's profits?
So the majority of what we do is funded by the shop's profit. There are a couple of things we do. We do a thing called Remake Learning Days every spring, which is an international festival about teaching families and kids ways to learn in different capacities and how to make learning
in creative
fun.
New ways.
And we do 3 events for that over the course of it. One is an educator seminar, and the other 2 are kid and family focused activities. And so those are funded by the Patterson Foundation, which is a organization that helps fund educational opportunities. And so those they reach out and they help with us putting that together, and then those become listed in international programming. It's all started kind of around Mr. Rogers, who is my personal hero, and what he believed education should look like. And so getting to be a part of that is such a huge thing for us. But they fund all 3 of those events that we do during the April time period into May. And then we have a couple of other organizations that have given us grants to build out some of our writing and reading programs that we have coming up that aren't even out yet. So we're really excited to grow those. Like I said, we're working with a local high school. Their National Arts Honor Society program we created a thing this summer that was called Slam Academy, which had professional artists and writers that taught advanced classes for kids in the community. So it's like, hey, instead of going to a university for a summer program where it costs you $6,000 for that summer, and that is an exact number of a university near us for their summer camp for kids. It's like, hey, come here and you can learn these skills from professionals in the industry right now. And we'd have a lettering class. We had a composition class. We had an inking class. We had writing classes that broke down all the different pieces of writing. And now we're able to take that to this school and use it for their National Art Honor Society students to be able to.
You forgot my favorite class. And then a marketing class where the kids learn how to actually market their own comic book.
I taught that
which
class.
Is right. You taught that class, and it was incredible. Like actually showing 9-year-olds, hey, now that you've made something, here's how you can sell it to your family and friends and beyond.
And how to build a portfolio out of what you did. So.
Well, there you go.
I know you
raising.
Right.
My next generation, right? Yeah.
Right. Seeing Adam's language. Yeah. That was actually a class that I then had to turn around and offer to all of the adults too, because all of the adults in the area were like, we would also like to know how to put our portfolio together. And the adult version of that class, Adam, is 3 hours long. It is
only.
Only.
Yeah, I'm sure I could just get started at 3 hours.
You really do. You only get started at that point. I was like, okay, we're going to breeze through social media. And they were like, no. We'll stay an extra hour for more social media conversation. I was like, okay. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, speaking of, I'm going to give it, only because I'm rarely sitting at this desk, but this is also where I read. If you're at all interested in social media, can I give a shout out to this book by Gary Vaynerchuk?
Oh, wow.
Anyway, day trading attention. It's really about building social media programming that works. Anyway, okay, so I feel like you're pulling out. This was the workbook.
I was I can't. While we're talking about it, so this was our first program, and it's become our biggest program since. Actually, Katie Pride uses this at her store now. We've rebranded it for Books with Pictures. But yeah, you can hold that. That is our Create Your Own Comic workbook. Mm-hmm. And so it's dual coded, so you learn from the writing side and the art side of your brain. But it walks kids through what comics are, and then they make a character. They get to figure out how you create problems for your character and how you break those apart. They learn what roughs are, so they get to do rough sketches. They learn how to make a solution. We talk about villains and all the things like the who, what, when, where, why of what makes the story plot work. They learn how to graphic organize it, so they can learn how to do those page breakdowns if they ever need to turn one in, if they decide to go comic style. And then they get to put it together into a 2-page comic. And we do this in so many places. We had 2,000 kids do the full long version with the book last year, and another probably 1,500 do it on a single sheet of paper that we do, the shortened version. Because we have an hour long, and then this one's an hour and a half to 2 hours long. But 2,000 kids did this version last year, and we are already at about, I think we're sitting at about 1,000 for this year that have already gone through the program. Right. I think going into July, we were at about 750. So, and it's fascinating to see what they come up with. And it's free. The kids come in. We do it at least once, if not twice a month, for the kids to come to the store. But then we do it at every school that asks for it. We do it at libraries. We do it at other nonprofit organizations like Boys and Girls Club and things like that.
And for your business perspective, we came up with this. Shannon actually wrote all of this on sheets of paper, what she wanted it to be, and kind of hand drew it out. And then I did all the graphic design, and we built it all of ourselves. And then we print them ourselves through printing companies. And these aren't cheap. So this is another thing that our nonprofit funding goes to pay for these books that are then free for all the kids too.
Well, we should talk after, because it should be cheap. I can teach you how it can be cheap. The printing part, anyway. Right. I can help you with that.
Publishing.
Right.
I've actually done when I owned Brave New World. My then wife and I did something very, very similar. In fact, it was I'm getting some real deja vu watching the two of you here. But yeah, I think you're definitely onto something, and I think it's incredible that you found a way to monetize is a really harsh word, but you have found a way to fund this, right? And I think that's really important, right? It's because it is marketing at its base. You're creating a new readership that is just going to support your shop going forward, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I taught that workshop at Comics Pro this year back in February. I taught a workshop on how to connect with schools and libraries and how to build programming for this. And that was one of the things I said is that, I'm going to talk to you from the initial stance of the altruism that goes into this of building this out. But as for-profit comic retailers, don't forget that this also does bring these people into your programming. And that's kind of what led to our most recent program, which is now used at 8 stores nationwide, which is our Books Are Magic program. And that is, it's kind of essentially like a comic book version of Reading is Fundamental, where every month has a theme, and I curate a book list that goes from young readers to teen. And then I create an activity that they can do, and it comes with a complete lesson plan that is actually done as a curriculum so teachers can use it, and all the pieces of that you would need to do it. There's always a version, like if you don't have the supplies, here's a way you can do it without supplies for kids who might not have access to that. And then there's a dialogic question guide that goes with the theme. And so you can give this out to parents to know how to talk about the book with their kids, or if you're an educator. And one of the things that I've told all of the stores that use it is, as a store, this is great to have just in your store. You can print it out. You can have it as a thing for kids to come to. You can make an event where you do this activity. But as a for-profit business, you can also connect with the school and say, hey, we have a curriculum that has comics that go with it. If you'd like, we can buy the book. You can buy the books from us for your classroom for whatever rate you have for your schools or libraries, and then we provide this resource with it for buying the program, like buying the book from us. And so it's a great way to get into that. And I actually every month rebrand every single asset for every store that does the program, and it's 100% free from us to the stores. So every store, I'm like, if you want to do it, literally, and if you're watching this later in the future and you want to do it, you can literally email me, contact@badcity.org, and I will add you to the list, and you will get those assets for free. And they come in PDF and PNG format, so you can use it for your social media, and you can use it for networking with schools and libraries, or just put in your store. And like Doug from Comic Cave, he uses it in his store. He has like a little sign that he puts up that has the information and how to do the activity, and he'll put that up in the front, like the kids section. A lot of times Hello Comics has been doing really great at like getting that out there. Of course, they're always doing fun stuff for kids, and so they've added that into there. And we have one bookstore that's in Texas, that's an indie bookstore, that they're actually using it to build out their customer bases, knowing that they have comics for kids and stuff, the graphic novels for kids. And so it's such a fun way to get reading and readership of those kids and get them to brought into the stores. Hey, we have an activity, and it's like, if you can't think of that activity, don't worry, I already thought of it for you. Like, here it is. Like, you don't even have to do the work.
We're doing it anyway.
Like, so yeah, if I'm going to make this activity for my store, why not give it to all the other stores for free?
Right.
And then they can do it for their store too. And now we have more kids reading.
Get into reading. Yeah, exactly. And that's, at the end of the day, that's the goal.
Right. And it's such a great thing to see stores start to like build those kid sections and get that base starting to roll out even more so for them. And then just to see the kids get excited. Our favorite thing is the first time a kid comes in, they might have their device that is either theirs or their parents that they're looking at. But by the third time they've come to our store, they don't even have a device with them.
I saw a maybe 6-year-old, 7-year-old drop an iPad on the floor to pick up a book. Luckily, it was in one of those rubber things, but threw that thing on the floor and grabbed a book and started reading it. And his parents were like, can you pick up your iPad? He's like, but I'm reading.
I'm reading.
I was laughing.
Hey, we love it.
Stand behind the counter.
Right? We're just like, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We want to see them get that excited, that, hopefully don't break the expensive thing that your parents gave you, but, put it down.
It's interesting. So there's a debate that I've been having with people through the show and outside of the show about, people talk about the future of comics retail. That's part of what we talk about on this show, is the future of the comics industry and comics retail, and what does it look like? And one of the things I keep coming to is, as far as generationally, we've never been in a more solid place to be optimistic about the future. We've got an entire generation of kids that are being raised on, Raina Telgemeier and Dogman and, the hundreds of books that Scholastic's putting out every year. I think that there's a disconnect for most shops of how do I draw that person who found these books through the Scholastic Book Fair or whatever, as they go into, say, adolescence, right? And we want to transition them into more grown-up material that's still comics. How do you two think about that? Because you've obviously given a lot of thought to converting those kids to customers now. Like, what does that look like further down the road, do you think?
Yeah. Well, for one, to answer the first part of that, how do you convert the Scholastic Book Club to somebody who comes to your store? My first thought is, where were you during the Scholastic Book Fair? I have made it a point to be at schools on their literacy weeks, which is usually when they do Scholastic Book Fairs. Or I've got about 4 or 5 schools now that do mini Comic-Cons at their schools. And it usually also includes their Scholastic Book Fair, or it includes a book fair just specifically from us. Where are you that your school knows who you are to go from Scholastic Book Fair, that your community is looking for you as the next place to buy the book from?
And does your shop carry books that are already at a Scholastic Book Fair? I Spy and Waldo are faced out at our shop. Where's Waldo and I Spy, and everybody picks them up. Little kids, adults, everybody. Because it brings you back to that Scholastic Book Fair. I wear a Goosebumps shirt in the store once or twice a week, but nobody back when we were kids said, oh, our kids are reading Goosebumps. How do we transition them into older books? But we were all picking them up.
And we've proven scientifically now, and this information is also in our kids section, that we've scientifically proven that comic books teach more unique, rare words per 1,000 than almost any other medium, and more than the adult books for sure. And if that's the ratio that we're rating on the quality of a book, then the kids' books are actually crushing it right now. And so and the comic books in general. And so we bring these kids in, and we have Dogman Day. It's a big thing we do where kids get to come in and they do Dogman activities, and we have all this fun. And the question, I'm running the activity, so the question Matt gets the most is, where do I take my kid after Dogman? What do they do? And he's like, have they read Investigators? It's a little more text heavy. It's gonna still has the fun of Dogman, but it goes a little further. And then you get
Have you tried Max Meow?
Have you tried Max Meow? Okay, you're on that. All right. Now, what about Max and the Midnighters? What about the Percy Jackson comic adaptation, so that they get into it and then they want to read the novel that comes with that? How do you keep that moving? And, the biggest issue there is when they hit that point where they're like, I don't want a graphic novel, I want a single issue comic. That has been the biggest issue, because we did get rid of Marvel Action, and so there's not there is now, because we have Spider-Man in the last 2 weeks. We've got Spider-Man Homeroom Heroes, but we didn't have Spider-Man necessarily consistently that was 7-8-year-old friendly.
There's not a Batman book for kids unless it has Scooby-Doo in it,
or Howard.
Batman,
Robin, and Howard.
But even then, it's not drawn by Greg Capullo.
Right. Kids
still want Greg Capullo.
They want that fabulous art, but they want, and so that's the hard thing is that we've taken so many of the teen heroes and put them into the big problems of the world, like your Miles Morales and things like that. Like Gwen is still pretty much anybody can read, but there's a lot of things that are coming up in some of those where you're putting them into some of those bigger stories. You're putting Miles Morales as the central point of Blood Hunt. And the parents are like, that's in a poly bag. I can't give that to my 8-year-old. And you're like, no, you can't. And so that's kind of the biggest issue where we're seeing is when I get out of those graphic novels that are made for kids and I want to convert to a single issue comic, but as a parent, I'm not ready for my kid to have that. But as a kid, I don't want Batman, Robin, and Howard, or I don't want to be reading Scooby-Doo at school and my friends make fun of me. What do I give you? Where do I go then? And honestly, some of the biggest helps this year have been those Disney comics from Dynamite, the cartoon comics that they've been doing, like Thundercats, Transformers,
Saturday Morning Adventures
from Ninja Turtles. Like those kinds of things have been huge. Godzilla is probably our biggest seller. Outside of Transformers,
Godzilla, those are the top two.
Biggest thing, because Godzilla is always accessible for everybody. It doesn't have, there's not really too many violent things that you don't want your kid to see. That's not fantasy violence, it's a giant kaiju. We're not worried about that. Maybe we're not getting into the repercussions of how Godzilla was made with the kids at 8, but
they're eating trains. They're not eating arms.
Right. And so that's kind of become the thing that we're like, okay, everybody can go for Godzilla and they'd want to, because the movies are still coming out. And that's the other thing is for the kids, give me a comic that's got a property that they could see in a movie
that they're already excited
about. And that's where manga still comes into play too.
Absolutely. Having a manga section is a huge part of it. But I wanted to say as a sidestep from that, that's a great way of getting the kids into the thing. The other great way, honestly, that kids are going to in the future read comic books is having a great experience at the comic book shop. And that's again where the developmental memories come in again. Were the kids treated respectfully? Did they have a good time with their parents, or were they cast aside, and talked down to and belittled? Those are obviously two extremes, but at the end of the day, we want kids to come in. We have a very bright, colorful shop. When you're in there and the kids are running around, they're having a good time. I want them to feel like, oh my God, this is the greatest place I've ever been in my entire life. People are nice to me here. I feel safe. My parents like it here too. And then when we grow up, you have those memories. I mean, the number one thing that drives sales of comic books is not MCU movies. The number one thing that drives the sales of comic books is nostalgia. We buy nostalgia. So that's why you're seeing an increase in Spider-Man, because the kids who now have money, who are over the age of 26 and grew up with Tobey Maguire, they're interested in buying an AF-15 now. People who are my age are interested in buying a Ninja Turtles 1 now. That's why the price of that book has climbed the way that it has. People buy nostalgia, and your nostalgia drives you. When we talk about comics, a lot of times they say, what's your superhero origin story? What got you into comic books? What was that moment when you first pulled, oh man, I remember pulling this off the spinner rack when I was a kid. I stopped buying them because they hit 40 cents. Ha ha. We all have those moments, and those are the things that are driving our purchasing habits as we get to be adults. So when I was a kid, like we talked about, it was Dick Tracy, it was Calvin and Hobbes and Peanuts, it was the stuff in the Sunday Tribune, or in the Chicago Tribune, in the daily newspaper strips. But I also went to comic book stores and I saw this stuff. I wasn't really interested in reading comic books, but I had a great time when I would go there with my dad and he would show me all of the stuff and we'd look around. Didn't really buy anything. There weren't comics for me. There was Spawn, that was coming out and it looked cool, but it wasn't being bought for me the way that you would think. But at the same time, now as an adult, it was like, man, I love reading this stuff when I was a kid. I should go back to the comic book store. And then that conversion happens at a later time. So rather than trying to do the quick flip of how do we make the money off the kid tomorrow, think about the adult that you have that was a kid before and the kid that will be an adult one day. Don't sell your spec books tomorrow. Sell your spec books in 20 years. You're buying for 20 years from now. You're buying because you see a little kid running around. You go, hey, you like Spider-Man? Spider-Man. Who's your favorite, Peter or Miles? Miles Morales. And they run around. Buy an Ultimate Fallout 4 and don't sell it tomorrow. And that kind of goes to both sides of the thing. You know what I mean? To the kid side of it and to the prospective comic retailer side of it.
Okay, so now you're giving me two more double taps. One, I know you guys are great. I love it. Sometimes I have to do all the work, and you two, I just say three things, and then you go for 20 minutes.
Keep going all day,
right?
So two things I love about what just happened. One is I often have very serious conversations about the comic book industry, and they. Oftentimes, people when I step in and tell me, well, it doesn't make any sense. Why would people go to comic shops? You can get it cheaper at Amazon. You can get it cheaper at this classic book fair if you're a kid. Why would you want to? Why would you want to buy your Dogman? And my answer is always community. It has always been about community. It's always been about the experience. It's not about the product. It's not about the sale. Amazon has never been your competition.
No.
Your competition is maybe the movie theater. But not even then anymore. It is about legitimately, it's the places that people go to be around other people. And I think that's what you do an incredibly great job. In fact, I'm going to clip out that whole little rant. And just like every time somebody comes at me with that again, I'm going to say, just listen to these two go. But the other piece and I think that this actually really does hit on something that I found intriguing about your shop when I was watching like the Eisner videos and seeing the stuff that you do. Is that you do have this kind of like egalitarian, community focused education side of you. You're really focused on that. And that is not it's not a new thing, right? We've seen that kind of play out before. We've seen people do an incredibly good job of it. I would say that we did an okay job of it back at Brave New World. So you do that at an exceptionally high level, right? You're seeing all of this interactions with schools and other organizations. But then the other side of it is this collectibles, your broad back. It's a lot of back issues, where in this day and age, comic shops don't have back issues anymore, typically. And we're not talking about just long boxes of crap that didn't get sold off of the new shelf. I mean, God bless your benefactor who probably started you off on this, but you're talking now about the spec flip. The fact that you can talk in that language is remarkable, and still talk in this language. Do those two, do you have trouble squaring that circle? Because many people do. Many people have a real problem with the idea that this is both a reading material and this is a commodity. I personally have never had that struggle, but I struggle in communicating to people who feel like it's one or the other. You know?
You can go ahead. Okay. The thing that we talk about a lot in the shop is diversification. In the same way that you diversify your portfolio, you diversify your comic shop, right? So we're talking about bringing kids into the store and all these people who come in with their kids. Those kids are going to buy their books if they buy their kids' books, or adults are going to come in and they're going to want new issues, right? Oh, let's say, my subscribers, regular weekly subscribers who come in and just pick up their books. Okay, so that's two markets. You got kids, you got people buying new weeklies. Now you have the regular person who comes in off the street who just likes to read comic books, right? So they just want trade paperbacks. Oh, I waited for trade. I want the hardcover. I collect omnibuses. Okay, that's another demographic. And then you have people who are just looking for cheapos. Hey, you got dollar bins? All I want is dollar comics. Hey, these comics over here are $1 too. Yeah, I know, but these bins are marked with $1 on them, so I want dollar comics. And then you have your high-end collectors. Well, I want spec books, I want key books, I want graded books. Okay, cool. That's another demographic. And what we've found is that when one of the, and then you have backstock, of course, the guys, the run diggers, the run fillers, things like that. Now you have a bunch of different people who are all collecting comic books. They're not collecting toys, they're not collecting cards, they're not collecting shoes and video games. They're collecting comic books, but they're all collecting them in different ways. And we found that on certain days, we'll have days where we sell nothing but kids' books all day. We didn't sell one slab, no one even stopped and looked at the key wall. Okay, well then you have days where people only care about the keys that we have. And, you don't have any books over 10 grand. Well, that's what I'm looking for. And you're, okay, cool. You're the high-end collector guy. That's a thing too. We have Saturdays and Sundays where people just come in and pull out this high stacks of backstock, run filler, and completists, things like that. When we find that when one section isn't selling, the other is, which has really been great in terms of, like, I guess you could call it profit for a profit revenue. The revenue of the store is great because when one thing's not selling, the other is. So when we hear, books aren't selling the way that they used to, we're like, what are you talking about? Our kids section's empty today. Books are still selling, and they're, I meant new recent issues slabbed at 9.8 aren't selling for the same value that I was selling them for last year. It's like, okay, cool. Well, how are your half-off trade paperbacks doing? Because half-off trade paperbacks have been flying out the thing. People want to read the comic now. They got sick of it being in plastic. Now they want to read it. But then you turn around a week later and you sell 4 slabs in a day. And you're like, okay, sure. So it's the diversification of all of that. And one thing's selling and the other isn't. Does that kind of answer that?
Yeah.
Well, I love what you're saying is many stores do try and diversify, but they tend to diversify on other products that are add-on sales for that particular fan. So let's say you're a new comics fan, you pick up your weekly, your Wednesday Warrior. You're also going to like toys. You're also going to like gaming. You're also going to like magic cards.
Yeah.
You guys don't seem to be really focusing on that. You seem to be focusing on not just the Wednesday Warrior, but the half-off trade guy and the slap guy and the kids comics, right?
Because it's a comic book store.
And we broke, and this is actually, this is actually in their education information for Comics Pro for the new education team. I broke down every customer style for the comics market, like not just like the hobby market and the pop culture market. Like I have those, like your gamers and the person who's like, I'm mostly into games, but so I'm going to buy my cards, or I'm going to buy my board game, or I'm going to buy, and I'm also going to buy a soda and some candy or some chips while I'm there. Like there's that. But like, if we just look at just the comic customer, I went in and broke that down, and there are 8 different categories, surface level of just that. And it's like, okay, well, we have 8 different types of comic customers. So how do we hit each of those markets? Like we don't think about the different pieces of the comic puzzle as diversification. Like you were saying, like when you talk to most retailers and they're like, you have to diversify your product. It's like, don't forget Squishables. Don't forget, board games. Don't forget
and
this.
Comics is one wheel, or is one peg of that wheel, right? It's like comics, cards, Squishables, action figures, right?
But it's
comics
like,
is split.
What if you just split the comics and you put the same level of space and focus that you do into all those other types of things? What if you gave each section of the comic market that space in your store and that level of marketing and that level of attention, and you put all of that into it, can you still do it? And maybe you can, and maybe you can't. It also depends on 100% on your market. The thing about comic book stores is we're all also in very different spaces, and because we're not chain retail stores, we don't all have the same thing. But here's the thing that people don't realize about chain retail stores, and as somebody who's worked in a lot of them in my life on the upper side, they also look at the local market and change what they give and what they get. I worked for a fashion retailer called Maurice's for a long time, and Maurice's is based out of Duluth, Minnesota. So they originally started as both men and women's clothes. And over the time that they started actually spreading out across the country, they realized the menswear wasn't selling very much, but that plus size women's wear did. So they got rid of the men's department and brought in an entire section of plus size women's clothing. And they made a big marketing push about that. Still all women's clothing at that point, but you made a big deal about it. And the way they broke down the store was they had casual wear based around jeans, casual wear based around khakis, going out kind of dressy clothes, work kind of dressy clothes, your shoes and your jewelry in a very small section, and then your plus size department that had all of those things in it. And looking at that and going, okay, you're actually on paper just selling the same thing. You're just selling women's clothes, but you broke it down to look like it was a department store with just women's clothing. And then they did the sectionalizing by region. So being based in Duluth, Minnesota, winter is a huge season up there. You like die if you go outside for certain periods of the day.
It's very cold.
And being in Austin, Texas, it is not ever that cold. And so they would come down to talk to us about our sales, and they'd be like, okay, we want to compare your sales to what other stores in your area are doing, because the overall company sales right now are high on coats. We didn't even get coats. They didn't ship them to us. They were like, puffer coats are huge right now in 2008. And they were like, but you're not getting them because you're never going to sell them, and it would be a waste of money for us. Long sleeve clothes, you're only getting the burnout. You're not getting the actual thick, like thermal level long sleeve workwear, because it's not going to sell here. And that's kind of been a huge thing for me, is that so many people are like, oh, well, you have to have everything. And it's like, you can have the one thing and then you can specialize it towards your region. Like we said, when we opened our store, we did the demographics. Well, when I knew we were moving here, I went through every single comic, toy shop, game store in this area. I went through their website. I went through their Facebooks for the last 4 years at least. I read every review of every store and was like, what does a customer, what are the customers saying that they don't have or they do have? And then I looked at, because I come from this background, I looked at our indie bookstore market. Guess what? We don't have one. There's an indie bookstore.
There's none here.
In about 25 minutes away, which we partner with, and we have them bring their book bus out a lot of times. But the only bookstore in our town is Books A Million.
And it's a small location. It's not a big one.
It's a very small Books A Million. So it's like, okay, so the big thing that is actually missing for us here is books. And the thing that we care the most about is the books and all the different categories. So let's build a store like a Maurice's, where it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, on paper, we're just selling the one thing, but let's treat it as if it's the department store. And we give the respect of each department in that way, that if it was actually different categories and entirely different marketing plans for each of those sections and things like that.
That was the thing that I really, you got me on, was this. I've never actually done that work. I'm always curious about it. Is that those 8 different cohorts, essentially, right? There's 8 different groups, demographic groups, like psychographic. Yeah. I like cohorts. Let's go with cohorts. So there's 8 different types of comic shop customer, because each one of them has a different marketing plan. Each one of them has a different place you're going to reach them. They're going to have a different way that you're going to be able to reach out, which means you're always able to affect that sort of change. I think that's really real smart.
That said, we're also specialized in the fact that, like Shannon said, we looked at the other stores, we looked at what was already here. A lot of comic book stores, you're the only comic book store for miles, hours, right? Okay, well, you need a center in that town to have people play games. And games are extremely profitable. We've listened to other interviews on here. We have friends who are in games. Games have an extremely high return on investment. And gaming nights you can make a lot of money off of. People like to go there and spend the money the same way that they would at a bar. It's a fantastic thing. Shannon and I aren't gamers ourselves, though. So why would we carry games? And for me, I'm like, well, that's just another collectible. You can grade action figures. AFA grades action figures. They grade shoes. But I'm not selling shoes in my store either. That's a collectible that people also like to collect. You can do things with them, but I'm not going to sell that. But it's also not my passion or Shannon's passion. So we probably wouldn't be very good at selling those things. And one of the game stores here in town, Descent into Gaming, shout out to them. They're fantastic. They had comics when we moved here, and they had subscriptions, and their subscription manager came in and talked to us and said, hey, now that you guys are here, we never really liked comics. Our staff doesn't like comics. We're going to get rid of them if that's okay. Can we send all of our subscribers to you? We're going to be just a game store. And if you could send people to us, if people come in asking for Pokemon cards and stuff, that'd be fantastic. Now they come out on free comic book day and give out free Pokemon cards to all the kids. And we send everybody over there. If people want D&D manuals, they've got the D&D manuals. They got the dice and the tumblers. It's not our world. We don't know about it. We know about books. They know about games. It's a beautiful partnership, but not a lot of towns have both of those stores that are able to cater to their people. And that's either a shame or fantastic for you for business if you can,
Or if they do, they end up trying to compete over, shared categories, and and that ends up being a problem.
Like you said that, like entertainment, like thinking like, oh, this other entertainment business is my competition. Yeah. We don't think that there is such thing. And that sounds really pretentious when you say it like that, but we always say, our industry is the Justice League. And each type of store brings a different skill. We're each a different piece of that puzzle.
But you can't save the nerdy world without all of them.
You need them all, to make it work. And so we'll call other stores. We're good friends with Brian, who runs Dark Side Comics and Games in Sarasota. We helped him he wanted to start a large convention last year. And he came over and was like, will you bring everything you bring to the table? And I was like, sure, yeah. What does that mean? And he was like, whatever you want it to mean, you got it. And I was like, sure. And so I was in charge of all panel programming. We brought in all the comic artists for the thing, other than the people that Unknown brought. And then I ran the advertising, I did all the PR for it. So I sent out all the press releases and everything like that and helped build out that show.
And you don't lose business by being friends with other store owners.
No.
In fact, your community actually really likes you. What? You know Brian from Darside too? Man, I've been going to him for forever, but he didn't get this book this week. Okay, great. I'll buy it from you. And then when we're out of something, we'll call up Brian. Hey, you got it over there? Yeah, send them our way. They're a half hour away, but at the end of the day, at least there's another shop and everybody's friendly. And now you've taken that time to help a customer get the thing that they need, and they love you for it.
Which is the most important.
Yeah, I don't mind you going over there, but spend your money with them. Keep them in business too. Yeah. They do have the games.
I will say that it has been my conclusion, both from looking at the data, of seeing sales data, how this shifts when stores close. Yeah. And I've every time I've looked at it, I've come to the conclusion that every store runs between 30 and 50% of their consumers are actual comics fans. They will find a comic book store somewhere. Mm-hmm. But legitimately, 50% of most stores, even high as 70% of most stores, are just fans of that store.
Well,
they're not into comics. They're into that city. Right? That's what their identity is.
The same stuff.
Right. At the end of the day, it's just, what do you do that makes people want to be around you? And again, growing up with marketing, but also my grandma owned her own store. When I was a kid, she owned a grocery store that was in the middle of the country. So it was that country store and the bar. And she ran it all. She ran that grocery store, opened at like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning. She was up there doing it then. And then she was the only employee in the bar too. So when that bar opened up, she was running the bar. And she was busy all the time. And I always, I remember thinking like, yeah, originally like, yeah, there's nothing else around here, but it's country. There's a million bars. You know, that's the one thing the country of Texas does have is bars everywhere.
Oh yeah.
But it was like they all knew her. They all, you know, we celebrated everything. They were all a part of our lives. I remember when, you know, so many times like me personally, like I grew up going and working there. I started working with her when I was 9. She taught me how to run the register and run the grocery store. You know, I could do everything but the beer delivery, and learning how to like add those books up and do those different things. But the thing I noticed the most is she knew every single person. She knew their life story. She knew what kind of milk they drank. She knew who they were picking up for when they came in. When they came to the bar, she already had their beer ready to go at that time of night and was like, oh, so and so's going to want this. Like, I got to run it over to him. We got to go to Sam's because the dealer for the food was out of this, and I got to make sure I have so and so's cigarettes or whatever because they're going to come get them, and they only like the one kind. But the customers knew her too.
Yeah.
It wasn't just she knew them, which is what we always talk about, you know, and everybody, I think, almost on this show has been like, you got to know your customers, you got to know your customers. But the magic is when your customers know you too, and when they care, you know. Seeing that with her my whole life, and seeing so many of them, you know, oh, Shannon, like, you know, how'd that school performance go, or how did this go? And, you know, I didn't even live in the country. I lived in inner city San Antonio, but I was there every summer, and I was there as many weekends as I could. And so they got to memorize me, and they heard the stories from my granny. And seeing that now, like the greatest moment for us in that was, like I said, we got married in 2020. It got canceled. We got married in his cousin's backyard. About 8 people showed up, 4 of which were his cousin, 5 of which were his cousin's family.
Yeah.
And then we were like, we really want to do it again to have that experience. And so Posse East let us have a second wedding on the same day the next year, at the restaurant. And we were like, we don't want to like rent it out or anything. Like they were like, no, you don't have to. Just this whole section right here where the stage is, that's going to be closed. It's going to be set up with chairs, aisle runner, whatever decorations you want. It's your wedding. If customers want to come and eat, they're at your wedding now, if that's okay with you. And we're like, that's okay with us. And we were like, if all of our people take up the whole restaurant though, is that also okay? And they're like, yeah.
As long as they're buying drinks.
Right. They were like, we don't care. And so we have this wedding, and we on the books, because we're going to do it the same day, so it feels like it's exactly the same thing. And the person that married us had been a friend up in Chicago, so another customer who has since become my best friend stepped in to be the officiant. 2 of our volunteers decided they were going to be in charge of making cakes, and 2 more decided they were in charge of decorating and setting everything up. 2 of them decided they were going to be the ones to drive us around all day, so we didn't have to drive. You know, everything was done by somebody, and the reason why is because that date was the one time they've moved Free Comic Book Day ever. Is our wedding anniversary is August 15th, and that was the year that they moved Free Comic Book Day to August 14th. And we were like, we can't do Free Comic Book Day and get married the next day. There's no way it's gonna work. And our customers just were like, no, it's gonna work. We're gonna do it, and we're all gonna be there. And there was hundreds of Bat City customers.
Yeah, there were like 150 customers
that just showed up to our wedding. That they wanted to be there, and they stayed there, you know, all night, and they hung out. They supported the bar because they knew the bar was, you know, restaurant bar, whatever you want to call it, bar
supporting you.
Yeah. And so they're helping.
It's all about people.
Yeah, it was just so great to see that, like, when you have that, you know, when we needed to pack everything up in 3 weeks or less, it was customers that showed up. Customers that we met like once or twice who were like, hey, I lift things. I'm a gym trainer for a living. I can lift I can lift long boxes all day. I'll come over. And I'm like,
and they all helped them. I mean, twice. I said there were 4 rooms. They were all working in different rooms while we were doing what we needed to do.
Patching up boxes, you know, and it was
unbelievable. The community support is effortless.
I've been through something similar when I just moved across town. I didn't move states, but that's I do believe it, and I have lived it, and I've seen enough people now that I've talked to enough people that this what you're talking about. There's a reason that these businesses stick around, right? There's a reason that they're so resilient, and it's this community. I think there's just no question at all.
Yeah.
What do you think? All that said, what do you think is the biggest risk that comics is facing today?
we actually talk about this a lot, and for us, one of the things that we've actually literally seen be such a huge thing in the comic industry is that negativity, is that from internally, it kind of became cool in the last few years, since the internet existed. It's become more and more cool to kind of hate on the thing. Even if you like it, even if you are a fan of the thing, it's become a thing to be like, I hate this thing. And I think for a lot of our industry, we forgot that part of our job is to also sell the thing, and we revert back to that internal fandom. And so we see a lot of store owners who are live on the internet or in their own shops, or retail workers and things like that, who are taking part in the I hate this thing.
Can I make my analogy?
Yes.
If you have a furniture store, you don't buy couches and have them on display, and someone goes, hey, how's this couch? Is it real comfortable? And you're like, no, that couch sucks, dude. Don't sit on that couch. You don't want it. What? You're trying to sell couches here to make a living. Why would you tell people that the couch sucks?
And maybe that's their favorite couch. Maybe you're like, oh, I don't know, that's mohair. Nobody likes mohair. Well, the thing is that somebody does. That's why they made it.
Yeah.
And we find that has become a really big thing is, oh, this book, I don't know why they're still putting it out, this book is terrible, has become the way we talk about books as an industry. But what about the person who loves that book? What about the person who that is their absolute favorite book in the whole wide world, who now is ashamed to buy that book, is going to put it back? And we've had people, after a lot of the big stuff that went down last year with store owners and writers of books, say how much that the industry was terrible and the books sucked and things like that. We actually saw customers come in and say, oh, I saw so-and-so's interview and they said that those books aren't good and that real comic fans hate them. So I'm out. Right. I'm dropping it.
I want to cancel my subscription. I'm going to cancel my
entire subscription list because they're right. Those people didn't think that at all 2 days before that, but they're seeing these interviews and it's making them second guess what they may already be on the fence about. Or if you are that casual fan and you're like, oh, the rest of the comic fans think I'm stupid because I like this. Like, I'm going to use the best analogy. Matt's favorite Batman movie is Batman and Robin. And the amount of people who completely...
He loves chrome nipples. He just loves them.
Hey, the nipples were in Forever too, but no one ever talks about them in Forever.
That's true. Oh, you're right. You're right.
That's already out the window. And then there's 38 comic book references in that movie.
That are
but you probably didn't like Silver Age comics. Did you ever read the Silver Age comics?
Because
they're kind of just as hokey.
And that's always...
I loved the movie. I just wanted to make the joke.
The person that yelling about it. The people come in and they're like, oh, it's the worst movie. And Matt's like, well, here's why it's good. And it's like, it makes you feel bad about it. That store that I worked at, Matt talks about like, oh, I saw those videos of Shannon and I thought this must be a really inclusive store. The first time he actually went there was actually a bad experience. And they
said Superman. Why do you like Superman? Were you some idiot?
And it's like, you almost didn't come back. And if he hadn't come back, we wouldn't be having this conversation with you right now.
Yes.
See, there you go. And they could have ended a beautiful thing.
Could have ended a beautiful thing.
The negativity of the industry, and it just...
I think that there's, just to double down on what you just said, I think one of the things that the real true risk is not necessarily, I'm going to convince you that this thing is shit that you liked. The real risk is it becomes common knowledge that retailers think this.
Yeah.
Right? That's the real, I think that's the real problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this idea that comic book retailers hate X.
Yeah.
There's 20, whatever. Let's call it 2,800 of you. There's at least 3,100 opinions about any given subject. I mean, I have a hard time with it.
Doesn't even have to be, you could say one, they always say this, you've done management, you put the bad thing in the middle of the good thing, but what did the associates still hear? They heard the bad thing. And when we do that and we go out there and it's like, oh yeah, well, I mean, I told them I like this other book though instead. Yeah, but they didn't care about the other book. You made fun of the one that they like. And there's so much of that. Like with my weekly show, I don't tell you if I don't like a book. There is many a times where I'm done with that show and Matt's like, oh, I want to read that book. That one sounded like the best
awesome.
book all week. And I was like, it's actually not my favorite. You probably wouldn't like it. Like, knowing your reading taste, it's not for you. And he's like, oh, and I'm like, I just want, but it might be for somebody else. And I don't want to take that away from them because I'm not gatekeeping about it. I don't want to gatekeep it. And I want to tell you, this is what it is. If that's for you, amazing. Love it. Be excited about it.
You do have to end up starting to speak another language with your clientele, because clientele are going to come up to you and say, how about that latest Wolverine issue? Am I right? Wasn't that the greatest thing you've ever read? And I'm like, well,
I hear people really like that.
Right. Why did you like it?
Why, what was it?
No, that was always my line.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you think about this book? I hear people really like that book.
People are really buying it up this week.
Yes.
We had a kid who asked me, he comes in and he's like 20 years old and he goes, hey, Matt, the Red Hood is the best character DC's ever put out. Don't you agree? And I'm like, Shannon, how do I fix this? But you have to start speaking that language. You have to be positive about things, oh man, honestly, I haven't read that. I've been reading a lot of other things this week. I've heard that one's really good, like you said. What are you into that you're reading? And now you've diverted.
Yeah, exactly.
People love to tell you their side. So asking what is it that you like about it or why is that your favorite is so much easier. And at the end of the day, like, you definitely don't have to go on the internet just to tell everybody that a book sucks. Especially if your job is solely to sell books. Maybe don't go on the internet and say, oh, well, everything that came out this week was trash. Well, then guess what? Don't turn around and say, well, last week's sales were really low. Well, why do you think that was? You told everybody all the books were trash, and then they didn't want them. They put them back, and then you're mad that they put them back. Well, don't tell them they're trash.
Right. What was awesome last week? Why did you go on the internet and talk about what you thought was awesome? I get excited about Toxic Avenger coming out. Oh my God, I can't wait.
There's a lot of excitement for that book. Good for Ahoy, man. Everybody's excited about that book.
Absolutely. And just
what you two feel like? I asked this question of everybody, but I feel like it's just almost redundant because I feel like you two are just like two balls of hope, floating on a red wall. But with all that negativity, and negativity against negativity out there, what gives you hope and drives what feels like just a constant feed of frenetic energy over there?
Twofold answer for me, and you can have your own answer, obviously.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I mean, as a retailer and looking at like what gives me hope as a retailer, honestly, the Comics Pro organization in general, getting to associate with people like Jen Haynes, who is a powerhouse of a human being. Aton is just, you can't be in a bad mood if Aton's in the building.
100%.
And not even
security blanket.
Right, he is. He's like, you can add that to his list of things after he did your show where he was like, I'm going to use that in reference. You can add security blanket.
Security blanket.
But
Linus over here with Aton.
It's just even seeing Joe come in and immediately Joe Murray as the new president and have this like wonderful like idea of like I want to drive people to do more, but not just the people in charge, getting to talk to so many people. I've built a working relationship that is growing into like a wonderful friendship with Andrea Gilroy from Books with Pictures. When I said in Eugene, I was like, I need a team of people to help with this education program. And just seeing Andrea just go, okay, like, let's do this and this. And I'm like, this is all the stuff I need to do. And Andrea's like, I've already finished that thing that you said. And I'm like, it's so beautiful. And just getting to talk, with them. I went to we joined Comics Pro in 2020. So we did the first couple were just meetings that we went to were just the, online versions, and getting to go the first year it was in Pittsburgh, I got to meet so many people, and you've interviewed most of them. So, but like River from Goblin Market just was immediately like, you need a buddy, because I was by myself, and River was just like, you don't need to be by yourself. You're with us now. Like, you're a part of this group. We're taking you in. Katie Pride knew what we did, so she showed up with stuff for me that like connected to it, that she thought would be a wonderful thing to know. Grace and Sienna were so nice to me that first year that I went there. At the time, Ultimate Comics, they were both just like, hey, here's some, we're gonna take you like to the different things. And then publishers, like so many people. If I don't text Dan Crary from Oni Press like every day of my life, I'm like, is Dan okay? Like, I haven't heard from Dan. And that was all because I showed up to Comics Pro, and Dan was like, what is this that you're wearing? This is the best. Oh my God, I love it. You're amazing. Who are you? And I was like, I don't know, but you're my best friend now. And like,
it sounds right.
Building those relationships, like that's really like the big thing that gives me hope, is knowing that we're not alone in the process, and that there's so many people who also have our big giant balls of hope floating on their walls, and are wanting to actually act on it. It's not just about like, hey, let's be the hope, like let's have this hope. It's like, let's do something with it. I see so many Comics Pro stores that are just like, I could sit here and list names forever and just be like, this person inspires me so much, with everything they do. And that's a big part for me. And then just like within my own store, it's those kids who come in and don't care about comics and don't care about reading, who are now our super readers, seeing kids who are coming with a parent, and they come up to me and they say, Miss Shannon, can I have a reading log so I can track as many books as I can read while my parents are here today? Because I know my dad's going to be here for a long time, and I want to see how many books I could read before he's done. And that's the kid that when he came in was like this on his cell phone the whole first time he was there. And now he's like, how many books can I read? Seeing parents come in and say, my kids didn't know how to read when they first started coming here, and you sat with them and you got them excited about it and you worked them through it, and now they're getting awards in school for being the best readers. That's the real hope. That's the driving force that makes me be a ball of hope on a wall that wants to do something, is seeing those kids, seeing kids who were bullied in school and found their only way to speak their truth was through making comics, and now they have gotten to a point where they're actually like creating things like that. Like it's so incredible to see, and it's absolutely the most hope inspiring thing I could imagine.
Can I tell you just really quickly to something you just said there? We talked a little bit about how what you two are doing feels very familiar. Feels like what we did at Brave New World, and it in many ways it feels like an extension of what we were doing back then. And I had a similar experience the first time I met Daniel. I went, oh, this guy is like what I was doing when I started my career in like marketing and sales and comics. There's just something about his energy was like, oh, yeah, I get it. Anyway, and he did a shticky thing about Bad Idea at one point, and he thought that I was angry with him. I still, Daniel, if you're there, absolutely not. Anyway,
we all love you, Dan.
I all love you. Anyway,
your hope.
Any hope?
I've been thinking about this whole time, and I'm like, man, I really wish there was a little more clarity to the question, because what are we being hopeful of?
That's and that is a great question. I think that it's for most of the time, like I said, I asked this question a lot.
Yeah.
And originally the question came out of, there's a clickbait question of, what is the doom? What's the negative thing? What's the scary thing that's coming over me? And I was asking that question. I was getting some really great answers. And then I was finding, I was like, oh, it's Orion that's like leaving on a downer. Like, so, and what I realized was one of the things that I have a problem with in most retailers is this idea that I cannot affect change. I need the publisher to make things better for me. And the publisher has other people they have to deal with also. They can't just be your babysitter. So there's this disconnect, I think, for many retailers. And so for me, it was a way of saying, all right, now that we know what you're afraid of, what is it that keeps you going? because you're going to have to solve this problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so you tell me, what does that question mean to you?
So it's kind of like, what's the hopeful outcome for what the negative was?
Yeah.
That way, I just want to put it out there. If you are a comics retailer, if you believe that you're a comics retailer, you're not a game retailer, you're a comics retailer, read your books. Go out there, read 5 books a week. Read books, because the reason why you own a comic book store is because you like comic books. If you want to talk about movies in your shop, have a movie rental store.Movie rental stores can still be very popular. You can sell DVDs, you can sell movie posters, you can sell movie figures. Be into movies. If you love what you are doing, love it 100%. And for me, if I need hope in my life, turning to old Dick Tracy's, turning to Jack Kirby's young romance books, looking at pencils of artists who put their everything into making what they do. That's the reason why we do this. Every single Tuesday when those comics come out of the box and Shannon's taking them out and I'm coming and looking over what all the new titles that are coming out, that's the thrill of this. That's what makes you excited. And then, like Shannon said, being able to see a kid throw down in their iPad on the floor and pick up a book, like, that's the coolest thing in the world. We had a little girl at the shop in Austin who was not a good reader, and on our like going away celebration, she dressed up as Spider-Gwen and sat at a table in front of like 200 people on a microphone and just read books to everyone. She literally sat there and like Minnie, like, you know, like down here reading books on this microphone dressed as Spider-Gwen. And she just, can I read another one, Miss Shannon? Can I read another one? And this girl who was not a reader by any standards and doing that, and you're like, this is why we're doing what we're doing, and we're going to keep doing it. And then for yourself, every single day I walk down the hallway and see all of the books that we own and that we love and the things that got us into this and make us happy. It's like, man, it's right there. It's all around us at any given time. Sit down and pick up a book and remember why you got into this in the first place.
But that doesn't give you hope. I don't know. Your heart's probably too small as it was. Right. You're gonna Grinch for a while.
Right. Don't be a Grinch.
Where is there anything else we haven't covered? We've been talking for 2 hours solid, and I feel like you guys could probably go for another 4, and I wouldn't have to say much. Is there anything else we didn't talk about?
Peace, love, comic books.
There you go. I get it. Awesome. Where can people find you?
At Bat City Comic Books on all social media. And and that includes YouTube. Mm-hmm. And we have our website is batcity.org.
And that's mostly for our programming. We don't do online sales.
We do not do online
since sales. It really is just us. And there is, of course, like we never talked about, we have that unfair advantage of where we live above our shop. So, yeah. And that's why we work as much as we do, because it's so easy to just drop down the fire pole that we have here. We just slide down like that, and then we're right there.
We do want one. We don't have.
Yeah,
one.
We don't.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
I believe that someday you'll make that dream come true.
That's the
probably dream. Will. Yeah, I mean, because it's just the two of us. We don't do online sales because shipping takes away from time that we could be putting into kids programming.
And putting product online, it's all too much. Come to the shop, buy the stuff. So, if you see things in videos or whatever, you can always send us messages and we can send things.
Yeah. And I mean, again, if you're interested in kids programming and you need something, we've got that Books Your Magic program. It is available for all comic book stores. It's free. I brand it. I send it to you. You just have to print it out and put it in your store. Maybe buy some supplies and maybe have the books that are on the list so that people can buy them. That's probably a good idea.
To help kiddos learn how to read and things like that.
And it's fun. They're crafts, they're activities, they're super easy. It's usually something that can be self-guided. You can even just print it out for parents to take home with the book. I suggest, even if nothing else, printing out the dialogic questions to help parents know how to talk to the kids about books. We're always happy to do that. We're always happy to answer questions about how to have kids programming. And if you are a retailer and you're watching this and you're like, I have a lot of really good ideas that I'd like to share with stores, please join my education team for Comics Pro. We are building out an incredible knowledge base of resources and information, and everybody's knowledge is valuable. And we would love to have people do webinars and write-ups or whatever your learning style is. If you want to contribute in that capacity, it's going to be great.
Awesome. I have no doubt. I'm looking forward. We talk about the future of comics quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to the future of comics with you two in it. So I definitely appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks
for doing it.
Yeah, this show's been great. We always make the joke we don't listen to podcasts because that's what our career is essentially, is listening to podcasts, because you get everybody's insight on everything all day long. Yours is one of the only podcasts that I actually listen to all of the episodes of, and I like it because you also have the visual. Because I like to watch it, I don't want to just listen to it. So the fact that you have the YouTube and people can see, I want to see the people and feel like I know them by the end. And yours does a great job of that.
It is a parasocial relationship you end up with, and I think that's part of it. I'm really looking forward to having that, especially as convention season starts ramping up. Now I'm looking forward to having those conversations with people who feel like they've been having a conversation with me. So I really awesome. Anyway, thank you so much. Hi again. Thanks so much for watching Comic Industry Insiders. It, as always, is our pleasure to talk to the movers and shakers of comics and to bring you those conversations. We'd love it if you'd support us with a like and subscribe, and telling your friends is always good, but really what we want to do is hear from you. Any questions, any suggestions you have about our show, any suggested guests, frankly, anything at all, we'd love to hear from you. Our producer is nearly always Stephanie Gerk, and our researcher is Anthony Militano, who makes me look much smarter than I am. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Namaste, y'all.
Steph, you can enjoy this because it's recording. So.
Meet this cat.
This is Pumpkin.
Named for smashing pumpkins.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know you can't stay the whole time though, right? You're gonna have to get down eventually.